Communications here are such, John, that all kinds of things could have happened that we don't know about, and indeed that not everybody here on the ground knows about. But the president, of course, travels with the most elaborate communications facilities. The president has, the latest word we have now is the president has touched down at Shreveport, Louisiana, and it is apparently from there that we will hear whatever he has to say. So we are awaiting we're awaiting a signal, a picture, and the words of the president of the United States coming from Shreveport, Louisiana, a place that the military apparently felt that the president was safe to go. So we are watching and waiting for that, John.
All right, Britt Hume in Washington, thanks very much. We will continue to await the words of the president when he gets to a television transmission facility, apparently, as Britt told you, there in Shreveport. Frank Keating, the governor of Oklahoma, still on the line with us. Governor, you've been in this position. You've had to calm a populace horrified by a sudden terrorist strike. What does the president need to say, and how do Americans need to take in this cataclysmic disaster?
Well, this is an attack, an act of war against the United States. In my case, it was a domestic terrorist attack. In this case, ostensibly, it's an international terrorist attack. I think the president will appropriately say the first thing we must do is rescue and recover. We must pray for those who are injured, pray for those who are killed, and anyone who did this, we will get them. Real simple, but focus first on rescue, recovery, and prayer, and I'm sure that's exactly what the president will do.
There is going to be a great uniting of America, isn't there, coming out of all this?
Well, yes, because this was an attack on us, and in that building, that is a melting pot of America. There are obviously thousands of people of all different walks of life, all different races, all different religions and nationalities there. And to make a political statement by destroying innocent men, women, and children is never acceptable in any moral society. And this is absolutely an affront to civilization, and the president and the country will be united and will respond accordingly, and appropriately so.
And an affront to civilization is just what you'll see in the pictures that we are about to bring you. Again, these are unedited. We cannot exactly predict what you're going to see because we haven't seen some of them ourselves. But this is video as one of the towers of the World Trade Center collapsed. You can see the sheer terror on the people as that shockwave of dust and debris rolls toward our camera crew there. And all of a sudden, it is midnight in downtown Manhattan as the crumbled concrete, as the shell of what was once Manhattan's proudest buildings, pair of buildings, as it crumbled to dust. And it is still burning, it is still on fire. Untold numbers of people are dead, untold numbers of people are trapped. The rescue effort is going to go on for days, perhaps weeks. Again, imagine the mindset of these people who were at the base of the building there, watching what they thought was nothing more than a fire. Nobody knew at this point that these buildings were going to collapse. I might bring into the conversation Howard Safir, the former chief of police, police commissioner here in New York City, also fire commissioner as well. Mr. Safir, nobody ever thought the World Trade Center would fall. I mean, that's what the terrorists tried to do back in 1993, and they weren't even close to being successful.
That's true, and even the engineer who designed the Trade Center told me it was designed to withstand a commercial airliner attack. Obviously, that's not correct, but this is incomprehensible and just the kind of thing that, although we plan for every kind of terrorist attack, this is overwhelming for the emergency services in New York, which are some of the best in the world.
Let's look at the bigger picture. I mean, everybody wants to know who did this, but it's going to take some time, isn't it?
It is. I mean, this is obviously, and you know, it's not that it's time to worry about the people who are hurt and injured, but this is obviously an intelligence failure. We're going to have to figure out not only why we didn't have the intelligence, but we have to figure out how these hijackers were able to breach airport security and what we have to do to fix that.
It could be something relatively simple. If you wanted to, I mean, I have boarded airplanes before with my pocket knife, a 3 or 4 inch blade. That can be a lethal weapon, and nobody has ever stopped me. There are limits on what kind of a knife you can take on board, but a couple of trained terrorists, trained in hand-to-hand combat, could easily get into a cockpit and commandeer a plane.
Well, that is true. Also, the quality of personnel is very important. The technology is very important. And most importantly, the way you prevent terrorism is through intelligence. You can't prevent terrorist acts when they're taking place, but you need to have the intelligence so you know about them and prevent them before they take place.
Let's check in with Molly Falconer. She's in the Lower Manhattan at St. Vincent's Hospital, a scene of absolute chaos. Molly, what's going on there?
John, it has been a scene of chaos all morning. This is a hospital under siege. It's taking many of the victims up from the World Trade Center. They're running out of blood. They're running out of something called Silvadene, which treats burns. They have been raiding local pharmacies and local stores to try and get that. And I'm standing here with Kim White, who managed to make it out of Tower 1 right before it went down. And you're saying you had a hard time with some of those fire doors.
Yeah, the fire doors were locked, and we couldn't get them unlocked. It took about 10 minutes for somebody to actually come and open up the doors, and then we were able to finally head down. But then there were other doors that were locked, so we were brought into another floor when there was another explosion, and they finally let us continue to go down.
And your clothes are in shreds, and you still got debris in your hair. Is that what happened to your colleagues, and how were they?
I have a rim, which that's how we've been able to keep contact with one another. And I had my one of my male co-workers contact me when I was in the hospital and asked me and told me that he's with the entire team. Where am I? And I told him I was at the hospital, so everybody is doing okay.
How are people feeling, and could you see anything? Was there smoke all around you?
Well, when we got down to the bottom floor, we thought we were okay, and then there was a collapse. We don't know what collapsed. There was a collapse of something. The police and fire department told us to go run to the wall and don't look outside. Next thing we know, billowing black smoke just came in, and I mean, it went down my mouth, up my nose, all over the place, and people were hysterical at that time. You couldn't see anybody. You could barely see the lights of the flashlights that were downstairs. But eventually, I think they broke a plate glass window to Borders.
They were breaking glass to try and get out?
To try to get out to Borders bookstore, and we went through down their escalator and then up another escalator to come out, and that's how we finally got out of the office.
Okay. I'll let you go. Thank you very much for stopping. And John, we are hearing a lot of victims come, some staggering, out of this hospital. We've got reports that over 160 are inside. They've turned the corridors. They even turned the hospital gym into a makeshift ER. They have hundreds of doctors and nurses on call. Obviously, their disaster plans are in effect. They've sent several triage teams downtown. They have blocked off all of 7th Avenue, which is one of these main thoroughfares right in front of the hospital here, so that they can ferry ambulances from the World Trade Center to St. Vincent's Hospital. And all morning, all we've been seeing are gurneys out on the street standing at the ready for the hundreds of ambulances, I should say dozens of ambulances that are coming in, but who knows? There are no estimates as to how many will eventually get here. A spokesman named Mark Ackerman came out a few moments ago and said he can't put an estimate on how many people will be here, but we'll keep a watch on it for you all the time. Again, there is a call out for blood and something called Silvadene. It treats burns and infections. They have already raided the local pharmacies around the hospitals, and they're calling for more. Back to you.
All right, Molly Falconer at St. Vincent's Hospital in Lower Manhattan. Thank you. We want to take you out to Los Angeles now. A couple of the planes that were hijacked were bound for Los Angeles. John Dupree, our correspondent there, has some late-breaking information for us. John?
John, the ripple effect of this disaster felt clear out here on the West Coast. Three of the planes which crashed today were bound for Los Angeles International Airport, where you find me now. American flight number 11 with 92 people on board, American flight number 77 with 64 people on board, and United flight number 175 with 65 people on board, which may have crashed into the Pentagon. All bound for Los Angeles International Airport. Their numbers were not even on the arrivals board here. No one had begun to come here to pick up passengers arriving from those two cities. Now, and only now, one by one, family members and loved ones beginning to show up here at LAX, being escorted into the corporate offices at American Airlines here at Terminal 4, being escorted by United officials to a nearby hotel, being briefed on what has happened, being told that their loved ones, their family members, by all appearances most likely dead. The skies above Los Angeles International Airport, where 150 to 250,000 people each day take off and land, the busiest airport on the west coast of these United States, eerily empty. That's the effect here on the other side of the country. John Scott, back to you.
John Dupree in Los Angeles, thank you. Again, these pictures just coming into us now. This is unedited video. of the pandemonium, the fear, the chaos in Lower Manhattan as the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, the tallest buildings in Manhattan, once the tallest buildings in the world, as they collapsed in an incredible shockwave of dirt, debris, smoke, and certainly a catastrophic loss of human life. This was the reaction there in Manhattan. Nobody ever thought those towers could fall. Almost certainly the terrorists who tried to inflict this didn't think they could fall. They perhaps hoped it would happen, but nobody thought there would be this kind of catastrophic damage. William Daley and Howard Safir. William Daley, a former FBI agent who investigated the first World Trade Center bombing. Let's talk about the bigger picture once again. Sure, the terrorists wanted to inflict maximum damage, maximum loss of life, but their real goal is mental, isn't it? Aren't they trying to scare America?
That's true, John. In fact, my role was one after the incident in helping put security back in place for these once prestigious locations. And the thought is, when we do security planning and try to predict where terrorists will attack, we always think of what are the spots that are indicative of the American way, whether it's the World Trade Center, whether it's some other landmark, or what they call a trophy building that they like to have exactly what we see here, be up in smoke, and for everyone to be panicked and concerned. So when we try to predict terrorist acts, we look at these, but we really, at the very far end of the spectrum, would think that would ever come down to something like this. We always looked upon something worst case, like vehicle bombs we saw in Oklahoma City, or we've seen over in Europe, individual bombings. But when we look at planes, flying bombs with people in them, which are of and by themselves would be catastrophic incidents if they occurred.
On any given day, any one of these incidents would dominate the news for weeks.
Exactly.
We've had 4 planes crash today, 3 of them deliberately into buildings, 2 at the World Trade Center towers, 1 at the Pentagon, and 1 went down in an airport area near Pittsburgh. Britt Hume is keeping an eye on the situation in the nation's capital. Let's get the latest from him. Britt?
Well, the first thing, John, is that fire at the Pentagon continues to burn out of control and going ever deeper into the building itself. One presumes that the building has been now evacuated of all but firefighting personnel. But that obviously a worrisome situation. There you see a live picture of the plume of smoke, black smoke still rising from the Pentagon. Evidently, the amount of fuel that was spilled or whatever was aboard that aircraft was sufficient to keep that blaze going apace. From Capitol Hill, we learned a couple of other things. Senator John Kyle, Republican of Arizona, said to our Brian Wilson just a short time ago that members of the leadership are in various different, congressional leadership are in various different places, in touch with each other and with the administration. We have a plan, said Kyle, and it is in place. What that's all about remains to be seen. Brian also reports that at the Capitol Police Station, J.C. Watts, Tom DeLay, both were members of the Republican House leadership, had been seen there, as well as Democrats Dick Gephardt and David Bonnier. So members of the congressional leadership here in Washington, those 4 we know about and have been seen, and they are said all to be in touch with one another. As we await remarks by the President of the United States, who is at Barksdale, or is either on the ground or is about to speak from Barksdale military base, Air Force Base there outside Shreveport, Louisiana. As soon as that can be technically set up, we expect to hear from the President. We'll let you know.
All right, Britt Hume, keeping an eye on the things in Washington. Thanks very much. Howard Safir, again, this is something that New York City has planned for a long time. New York always thought it was an obvious terror target. You might say, in a way, we dodged a bullet back in '93 when the World Trade Center was bombed, 6 people dead, 1,000 hurt, but nothing on the scale of what we've seen today.
Absolutely not. This is incomprehensible. The idea of 1 plane was incomprehensible. The idea of 4 is beyond the realm of conception. And, you know, this is obviously something that was well planned, had to be well coordinated, had to be something that was planned for months, maybe even years. And, you know, finding the people who did this after the rescue operation, and we save as many lives as possible, is really the key here.
How is life going to change in America as a result of this, or is it too early to say?
Well, I think one of the things you're going to see is a re-examination of both our intelligence procedures and our security procedures. Certainly our airport security procedures are going to have to be put under a microscope and look for the vulnerability points, because four airplanes hijacked in one day says the system doesn't work.
Perhaps, Bill Daley, I'm just exploring some options here, but might we see almost armored cockpits from now on? I mean, those cabin doors, as anybody who's ever flown, are lockable but fairly flimsy. Excuse me, Bill, we want to go up to Shepard Smith, who's actually keeping an eye on things from the sky above Midtown. Shep?
I'm actually down in the newsroom now, John, and want to bring you an update on the facts as we've been getting them in the last few minutes. The FBI headquarters will be making an official announcement shortly. Fox News Channel will carry that for you as well. As Britt Hume mentioned, we are waiting at Barksdale Air Force Base, where President Bush is scheduled to address the nation in just a few minutes. It's our understanding that there are technical reasons that he's not on yet, but that should be happening shortly. I can also tell you that now the United States border with Canada has been shut down at all crossings. There is a report from Afghanistan now, from Kabul, Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden's people, and actually the Taliban now responding to this. Afghanistan's hardline Taliban rulers have condemned this devastating terrorist attack in New York and the one in Washington, and rejected suggestions that Osama bin Laden could be behind them. The Taliban's ambassador to neighboring Pakistan has now said that bin Laden, the Saudi dissident who has been given asylum in the country, does not have the facilities needed to carry out such an attack. Quoting now from the Taliban, "It is premature to level allegations against a person who is not in a position to carry out such attacks. It was a well-organized plan on connection with the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in East Africa that killed 224 people." Now, there are reports that the victim count at the Pentagon is now at 34. Those are unconfirmed reports at this moment, but certainly with a fire that happened so quickly and an explosion on that level, fears at the Pentagon are certainly running high. We're also getting word from NASA now that astronauts aboard the International Space Station can actually see the smoke rising from Washington and New York. That this plume of smoke that was once the World Trade Center in New York City can be seen from 224 miles in the sky. And on the International Space Station, they are watching in what is certainly a day which will live in infamy, September the 11th, 2001, and the worst terrorist attack in the history of the world. The updates are coming in fast and furious now from individual states across the nation. Suffice it to say that governments across this country are now shutting down all major tall buildings. That's the way it seems, as we've just gotten reports from New Jersey across the river where they watch these buildings fall. The governor of Pennsylvania now asking to use a Fox News satellite truck to address the people of his state. Overwhelming calls now from governors and congressmen and senators for calm across the nation. The president soon to address the nation about how the United States will respond. David Schuster has been reporting throughout the day that the military is now on an alert, which is parallel with alert that would be in place should we be at war. Newt Gingrich saying earlier that this is likened to Pearl Harbor. President Bush will put it all into perspective for us shortly. Those are the latest updates as we have them. Once again, the FBI to make an official statement in just a matter of minutes. This from our correspondent there at the Pentagon. The president to speak down in Shreveport, Louisiana in just a few minutes. John, both of those for you live when they come in here in the newsroom.
All right, Shepard Smith in our newsroom. Thanks very much. Again, to restate, you're looking at the place where the World Trade Center used to stand in Manhattan. A billowing cloud of smoke still rolling up from the foundations of the towers. They crumbled around, well, in the 10 o'clock hour. This after they were struck by two hijacked jetliners in separate incidents just before and just after 9 o'clock this morning Eastern Time. 50,000 people work in those buildings on a given day. It's certain that a good number of those people were already at their desks. Witnesses describe seeing people jumping from the upper floors in flames, preferring to make a quick end of their lives rather than suffer disastrously. Here is the picture of the second plane coming in. We are not exactly certain at this point which plane that was. It's believed that was the American Airlines Flight 77 from Washington to LAX. We believe that was the plane that was employed as a flying bomb to destroy the second of the World Trade Center towers. The structural steel in those towers, steel that was thought to be strong enough to withstand this kind of attack, ultimately gave way to the heat of the burning fuel from those aircraft. You can see there the pictures, people who have broken out the windows. They cannot breathe. They are leaning outside, waving handkerchiefs, towels, anything they can, waiting for rescue. Rescue that almost certainly never came. The towers crumbled one at a time, as you're looking at the replay here, in a tremendous shower of shattering glass and concrete. Almost certainly there will be casualties in neighboring buildings because the World Trade Center towered so tall above the buildings around it. As it fell, there'd be steel beams, girders, chunks of concrete, enormous piles of material cascading down from 1,000 feet in the sky, a quarter mile up. All of this material falling down to the ground, and anybody who was underneath it would have a difficult time surviving indeed. Also, we take you to Washington, where the Pentagon remains on fire, a fire burning out of control after a hijacked jetliner there slammed into the outer wall, the outer ring of the Pentagon. Now, this one could have been worse. We have early indications of perhaps 3 dozen people dead, but it appears that the impact of that plane actually came on the ground outside the Pentagon. So the fire is still burning there, the Pentagon in flames. Clearly, this was an attempt to strike at America's financial structure, the symbol of America in many respects, the World Trade Center, the tallest, the most visible buildings in New York City, right alongside New York Harbor, and also a strike at the Pentagon, the center of America's military. Shepard Smith has a late update now from the newsroom. Shep?
John, we have just gotten this in from the World Trade Center explosions in New York City. The death toll is now estimated at 10,000. This out of New York, and this, according to the Pentagon, that there were undoubtedly deaths at the Pentagon as well. Representative Jim Moran, coming out of the Capitol Police headquarters, has just told Fox News on camera, again, he is a Democrat from Virginia, that the official estimate now is 10,000 have been killed in lower Manhattan as the World Trade Centers collapse to the ground. We're expecting to hear from the president shortly, John.
All right, Shepard Smith, thank you. And that death toll, suffice it to say, could certainly go up. There were thousands of people, perhaps, among them some of New York's finest and bravest police and fire officials, trying to effect the rescue of those people who were caught in the top of those buildings. At the time, we thought, and here you look at the replay of the plane slamming, this is the second plane now, slamming into the second tower, and the catastrophic explosion there that certainly killed everyone on board the plane, as well as probably hundreds in the World Trade Center towers. So there were firefighters and police officers on the ground trying to effect the rescue of those people above, and all of a sudden, both of the towers came cascading down around them. Clearly, a great number of the people whose lives have been lost today are the firefighters and the rescue crews who were trying to help save others. We are awaiting word from President Bush. He was in Florida at the time this all began. As you look at these unedited pictures of people scrambling away from the dust cloud resulting from the collapse of the World Trade Center. President Bush was on the ground in Florida. He was to address an elementary school on what was supposed to be an upbeat event promoting education in this country. President Bush is safe. Air Force One took him to Shreveport, Louisiana. We expect he will be addressing the nation momentarily. Once again, the U.S. military is on the highest state of alert. The kind of alert that would have emanated from the Pearl Harbor attack. And as former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said today on the air on Fox News, certainly this attack will bring with it more casualties than the American forces lost at Pearl Harbor. This is a 21st century Pearl Harbor. Experts have been saying for a long time that perhaps the military attacks of the future would be of this kind. And Bill Daley, former FBI agent, I guess this is the worst kind of scenario. This is what was predicted, but perhaps maybe never imagined?
It was predicted, imagined, but the countermeasures to ever deal with something like this were was something you couldn't come to grips with. How are you going to stop commercial airliners from coming down routes around New York that they normally travel?
It's monumental, the scope of the catastrophe. Britt Hume is in Washington now with some more information for us.
Yeah, John, we just, as we've noted, that fire continues to burn at the Pentagon, but the Secretary of Defense, we now understand from Admiral Craig Quigley, his spokesman, who has just spoken to Fox News a short time ago, says that he is in the building, that he is in the National Military Command Center, which is a kind of bunker within the Pentagon, where it is said that communications are working. While the place is a little smoky, the Secretary never left the building. That threat condition Delta, which David Schuster earlier described to you as the most advanced threat condition there is, has been set for the Pentagon. Quigley seemed not to know when asked whether that was the military threat alert nationwide, but as for why it was imposed at the Pentagon, he said, quote, it was simply the prudent thing to do. I think most people would concur with that. The members of the congressional leadership, Brian Wilson reports from Capitol Hill, where he's been at the police station there, have been taken, it is said, to a secure location. We earlier heard from Senator John Kyle that said, yes, they are secure, they are in touch with each other, that the plan, at least for dealing with these things, as far as Capitol Hill is concerned, is underway and in effect. The FBI, John, is saying that they received no warning about this, no warning at all. And for that reason, obviously, that U.S. forces were not on any special alert. That's the latest from here.
All right, Britt Hume in Washington, thank you. As you look at these pictures of the smoking side of the Pentagon, it bears repeating that most of the building is still intact and even occupied. David Schuster was in the Pentagon for a good part of the morning. David, are you still inside the building?
John, we are. The pictures that you're looking, if you imagine the camera swinging to the left and going to the next concentric ring, that's where the media offices are, and that's where we are. We can tell you that the hallways, to give you an extent of how big the fire is that continues to rage out of control in many of the offices of the Pentagon, on our side, which is clearly, several hundred feet, or if not several hundred yards from where the fire is that you can see on the screen, the smoke is so thick that you really can't see down the hallway more than 20 feet in front of you. That's how thick it is. A short time a while ago, we saw 6 FBI agents walking down the hallway heading towards the part of the building where the plane crashed. We do believe now that the plane, in fact, that it was a direct hit on the south side of the building. Some of the local television pictures, when you look at them, you can see that there is a gaping hole at least 150 feet wide by the helipad. It does not appear that there are any marks on the grass in front, so it does seem as if the plane that struck the Pentagon did hit directly into the E-ring, the outside ring. At the moment, there are still at least, from our estimation, perhaps 20 to 30 offices over 4 floors that continue to burn out of control. The flames are shooting out the windows. The fire apparently continues to spread north along the building, north as far as the side facing Arlington National Cemetery. Again, the Pentagon has been evacuated, except as reported earlier, the National Military Command Center, which is where Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld is located. In addition, as far as the threat condition Delta, that applies to some of the Atlantic Fleet, some of the Air Command and Control, the groups that would coordinate U.S. military assets along the East Coast. Many of these assets will be used as far as civilian help, civilian efforts. Furthermore, we're told that all U.S. fighters in the United States are now on alert and are under control of the North American Air Defense System known as NORAD. This is a joint U.S.-Canadian system based in Colorado. Fighters were sent up and escorted Air Force One into Louisiana. But again, the situation here at the Pentagon, as you can see, the fire continues to burn out of control. One of the problems that firefighters are having is that it is very difficult, because of how big the Pentagon is, to get to some of the inner rings where the fire continues to burn. John?
All right, David Schuster at the Pentagon reporting live. Thank you. Again, apparently in that updated report from David Schuster, the Pentagon took a direct hit. Let's get another update now from Britt Hume in Washington.
Well,
Britt?
John, the latest thing we have, just quickly, is that we're hearing now from through the White House press pool and from our producer Nancy Harmeyer, who's still in Sarasota where the president was, but in touch, that the president has made the statement that he is going to make. He made it to tape, and that tape has been dropped off there at Barksdale Air Force Base, Barksdale military facility there on the Texas-Louisiana border near Shreveport, and he's now headed. We know not where, and that the tape is being ferried to a local broadcasting facility there, and you now see the situation there, some live picture from the Pentagon of officials there in the hall, and here is the president. I'm sorry, this is the president to make this statement. This is Barksdale. This is tape, folks, not live. I'm sorry, folks. It appears there we saw the president start to come in. That, of course, was videotape, and that was a raw tape feed as it was coming in. It takes a while often for levels to be set and for everybody receiving to get clear that the picture and sound are coming in properly, and it is not uncommon at broadcast facilities when tape like this is being fed. We're going to have another go at it here now and see if this time we can hear this taped remark from the president.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward.
You see what's happening here. This is a videotape being fed from a remote location, and we are trying to get a clear signal and keep it from breaking up and get it onto the air. So sometimes this takes a little bit of time, and we will definitely do what we can to bring it to you as soon as we can see it and hear it clearly. That was the President of the United States. Here he comes again, same tape. See if we can hear it and see it more clearly this time.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. And freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
That concludes the President's taped comments from Barksdale Military Base in Louisiana. The President of the United States speaking just a short time ago. We know not now where the President is. You heard him say that the United States military is on full alert. All security precautions could be taken, that he's been in touch with House, Senate leaders and other members of the administration, as well as with foreign leaders. He said we will hunt down and punish those who are responsible for what he called this cowardly act. That concludes Fox News Channel's presentation and Fox News' coverage of this presidential statement. Back to you in New York.
Britt, thanks very much. It bears repeating that apparently Camp David, the president's vacation residence there in Maryland, apparently was the target of another one of these attacks. We haven't talked about it a great deal today because apparently that attempt did not succeed. But there was a fourth airliner, besides the two that slammed into the World Trade Center and the one that slammed into the Pentagon, a fourth airliner, a United plane, slammed into the ground not far from, well, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. And the intelligence indications are that Camp David, the president's vacation residence, and it bears noting the place where the Camp David Accords were signed, signifying a possible peace deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians, Camp David was apparently one of the attacks. Bill Daley, former FBI agent who worked on the investigation following the first World Trade Center bombing back in '93, is still with us. Bill, there is so much symbolism that we will have to be alert for as we look at the causes of what has happened today, right down to the names of the airlines involved, United and American.
You know, John, I think as we take a step back, and certainly we're all reeling from the shock of the first, few moments of this, which we're still into, and the recovery. When we look at what actually has happened and to the design that has gone into this by using domestic carriers, as you mentioned, ones that carry our own flag on it, crashing into symbols of our way of life.
Let me interrupt you, Bill, because we are going to...
Any questions that you might have?
This is a spokesman from American Airlines.
Today's events appropriately need to be addressed.
And again, Al, you can't confirm which plane went into what site.
I cannot, not at this point.
And it makes it difficult for you to release any information.
Right, it's just impossible at this point.
But Al, you did get a warning apparently this morning that something was amiss.
Well, again, every aspect of the investigation is being handled by the FBI, and they will respond to any questions you might have about the investigation.
How is American Airlines handling this in terms of operations, getting passengers off planes that are stuck on planes?
We are in total control of total contact with the federal government about every aspect of it, and working with the federal government on every aspect of it.
When relatives dial that 800 number, what will they be told, Al?
Well, we'll deal with them. We have procedures for dealing with them and doing the best we can to assist them.
Can you tell us if all your planes are on the ground?
At this point, I can't.
And what's the sense around here? Clearly, it's a terrible tragedy for your company. What's the sense in this building today?
Well, obviously, it's a matter of deep regret that the incident occurred, and we are working completely with the FBI on every aspect of the investigation.
Do you ever think you'd see something like this?
Well, this is an extraordinary circumstance, certainly.
Is it anything you all tried to prepare for?
Well, it's just, there's no way to prepare for something like this.
Al, I'm sorry, did you say all American flights were on the ground? On the ground?
Well, we are working with the federal government to ascertain that at this point. So, well, there's nothing much more I can provide at this episode. If we have anything more that we can provide, we'd be delighted to do that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al.
So there you hear from a spokesman for American Airlines. 2 of its planes apparently involved today. 2 United airplanes also involved today in strikes against the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and possibly an attempted strike against Camp David in Maryland, the presidential retreat. As you look at live video of U.S. Air Force fighter planes that are now circling New York as well as Washington, D.C. Shepard Smith has some late-breaking information now for us from the Fox newsroom. Shepard?
A wealth of information coming in, John. I can tell you now that the United States military has dispatched 2 warships and the National Guard to report immediately to New York Harbor to help in what will be the largest in-country rescue effort in the history of this nation, no doubt. To repeat our earlier information from Representative Jim Moran, Democrat of Virginia, who came out of the Capitol Police Headquarters, and said on camera an estimated 10,000 people are dead in New York City, and says the attack on the Pentagon, there were undoubtedly deaths as well. The fire at the Pentagon still quoted as being out of control in the words of those there trying to put it out. This information from the West Bank city of Nablus, where we now have reports and videotape coming into Fox News Channel, where thousands of Palestinians are this day celebrating Tuesday's attacks, chanting, "God is great," and distributing candy to passers-by. The Taliban has made a statement as well, saying that it is not right to be putting this off on Osama bin Laden at this moment, that he does not have the resources available to do such a thing, and the Taliban there has itself condemned today's attacks. President Bush and a handful of aides were whisked away by motorcade from Capitol Hill. Mrs. Bush, that is. Mrs. Bush, the First Lady, and a handful of aides whisked away by motorcade from Capitol Hill, where she was to have testified at a Senate Committee on Education, to a hideout now, the First Lady in a hideout away from the White House. There, the sequestered group huddled around a single television in their hideout and channel surf for the latest news. You may be hearing a broadcast going off within our building. We are now in a 45-story building, the News Corp building, and we are hearing on overhead that the New York City Police Department is requesting that all non-essential personnel in the building be evacuated immediately. Here is the situation now. It's my understanding that these evacuations are happening in high-rises across New York City. 50,000 people scheduled to work this day in the Twin Towers. Hundreds of thousands more across the city, and all of the skyscrapers in the city of New York are now being evacuated. The problem with that is the subway systems are down. Traffic is almost non-existent. We travel here by cabs, which are not on the streets. John Scott, back to you in New York.
Fred Smith, thank you. I want to bring in somebody who has kept an eye on this kind of situation over the years. Bill Richardson, the former Energy Secretary and UN Ambassador, is joining us by telephone. The Secretary Richardson, this is an appalling development. I can only ask for your gut-level reaction, and what should America's reaction be?
Well, first we have to support the President, who I think made a very, very important statement that we're not going to tolerate this. We have to pray for the victims. I think this is a time when the country needs to come together. This is an unbelievable tragedy. It looks like the work of Osama bin Laden, who I had tried to extradite several years ago from Afghanistan as UN ambassador. It's a coordinated attack. I think we have to get the best intelligence we can from our allies and friends around the world, and then basically plan a huge, massive response against these perpetrators.
Well, as you say, you have tried to get him extradited before. The U.S. has been pressuring the Taliban to give him up for years. What further pressure can we bring to bear?
Well, I believe that the first thing we need to do is penetrate those terrorist cells to find out exactly where he is. We need a massive response against him there. Secondly, we have to raise the stakes in the international community to initiate sanctions if nations don't cooperate in extraditing him to the United States or finding him. This man is a menace to the international community, not just to the United States. And thirdly, I believe that we have to bring the international community, our allies, developing countries, in a war against terrorism. Terrorism hits across borders, and there has to be an international, perhaps United Nations response, a coordinated response to prevent this from happening again. This is a massive attack on the United States, but also on the international community.
Bill Richardson, the former United Nations ambassador, thank you. As we continue to keep an eye on the skies over Manhattan and in Washington, D.C., people are nervous, understandably, when they hear jets fly overhead, and many of the jets that are flying now are military fighters. On alert there, the Air Force and presumably the Navy as well have military aircraft patrolling the skies over the nation's capital and also New York City, probably several of the other major cities as well. Let's go to one of our correspondents in Washington, D.C., Rita Cosby, who has some late information for us. Rita?
John, I've been talking to intelligence sources for a few hours, and the last thing that they said to me was all signs are strongly pointing to Osama bin Laden. One intelligence, this is a senior official at an intelligence agency, told me that on June 20th of this year, bin Laden released a video to his followers saying, quote, "It's time to penetrate America and Israel and hit them where it hurts the most," signaling that he may plan some sort of attack on U.S. soil. In addition to this, John, they're also looking at who would have had the capability, who would have had the motivation. They said in recent weeks there has been a lot of activity on Islamic chat rooms talking about threats against the United States. But in terms of actual training for Osama bin Laden, he does own a number of planes, also trains specific pilots to actually be able to carry out these type of attacks. And this is something that intelligence sources are saying that they were aware he was doing this type of training, not necessarily to attack the U.S., but to train for suicide attacks on planes and other mechanisms. He also, as we know, is believed to be behind the attack of the USS Cole. And, of course, that was someone who came up on a boat and planned a suicide attack in that mechanism. They do believe, however, if he is connected to this, and again, this is just a strong possibility that they're looking at, that he would have been augmented by another group. They said that Of course, he has widespread tentacles across the world and has followers across the world. And among the possibilities that could have that they're looking at right now is augmenting would have been a Palestinian group and also the Hezbollah.
All right, Rita Cosby. This is just an absolutely stunning day. I still cannot get accustomed to the pictures that you're seeing there on your screen now. This is a looking, well, we were seeing Lower Manhattan. Now, this appears to be the area around Reagan National Airport in Washington. Hard to say. We'll find out what these pictures are specifically. But fighter jets now patrolling the skies over Manhattan as well as over Washington, D.C. There is the picture where you should see the World Trade Center standing tall and proud, but they are gone. 50,000 people scheduled to work in those buildings today. We don't know yet how many of them were able to get out, but the estimates are that 10,000 are dead. Hard to wrap your mind around a number like that. 10,000 dead. We suspect that the number is going to go higher than that. Brit Hume is in Washington, D.C. Brit?
John, some senior members of Congress, members of the Senate in particular, have been heard now on what they think the congressional response ought to be. Republican Senator John Warner, who is the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, said just a short time ago that he believes that the Congress needs to meet tomorrow or as soon as possible in some place. He also assures Washingtonians and those working in this city that there is a military air cap over Washington, D.C., which means that there are warplanes in the skies that will not allow any unauthorized plane near the city. That should be of some comfort to those who have been wondering whether a further attack from the air might be on the way or indeed possible. Senator Joseph Biden, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, told our Brian Wilson just a short time ago that he believes that Congress should meet tomorrow and that that Congress should meet in the Capitol building to show that business goes on. And that is something obviously the leaders of Congress are considering very urgently. Now, one of the things that we should point out here when you see the president touching down at an Air Force base at an unknown or at least previously unknown location, dropping off a videotape, having taped a statement there and moving on, is that at times like these, the security becomes very tight and security officials exercise maximum authority and get control of the situation. And after all that has happened, one can only imagine how extensive and how sweeping they want the further security precautions regarding the president and anyone around him to be. So I think we're probably in for some more mystery about the whereabouts of the president of the United States for some time now, because in a situation like that, security becomes the ultimate, the only, almost the only priority, and that will govern a great deal of what happens. Back to you, John.
Britt, I know we're all grabbing for information here, and it's coming in bits and pieces, but do you know anything about that plane crash that apparently there is talk of a plane crash perhaps directed at Camp David? How close did it come?
Well, that is what members of Congress coming out of briefings are saying, that the plane crash near Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh is up in the, Pittsburgh, of course, is some distance from Washington, but it is north and west of Washington, as indeed Camp David is north and somewhat west of Washington. And so if a plane were headed south and east out of Pittsburgh or in that region, that would be a likely place for it to, that would be a likely area for it to be in, or for it to be in that region. So members of Congress are told that intelligence officials believe that that's exactly where that plane was going when it crashed in that area. So that is obviously what they're thinking, that the Camp David retreat may have been under attack. And the Camp David retreat, by the way, is easier to hit than the White House. The White House is really not in anybody's normal flight plan or flight plane. That's not true of the Pentagon. The Pentagon is located just cheek by jowl with Washington National Airport, so a plane could be headed for what looks like a normal approach to Washington National Airport, veer off at the last minute and crash into the Pentagon, which appears to be what's happened. That would be more difficult to do with the White House. If a plane appeared to be on a flight path there would be jet scrambled. It would be harder to accomplish. Camp David, though, on the other hand, is another matter.
And I can't help but wonder, Britt, about the possible symbolism of a strike at Camp David, the place where, after all, the Camp David peace accords were signed.
Well, absolutely, the Camp David peace accords being signed there. And, of course, it is a symbol of the President of the United States. It is a place where he goes as a retreat. It is thought of as a safe and secure place. The symbolism of that would not be lost on the world either.
All right. Brit Hume again in Washington. Thank you very much. Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor the former Speaker of the House, is also joining us once again. Newt, you have a lot of high contacts at high levels of government. What is the thinking about the responsibility at this point, or is it too early for that?
I think it's way too early for people to have sorted this out. I think the first reaction is to, as Brett pointed out, is to make sure the president and the leadership is safe. The second reaction is to make sure that we save as many lives as we can, that we focus on the rescue effort. And I think you'll see coming out of this in 24 to 48 hours, a much more focused effort to then begin to look at who did it, how do we get at them, how do we hit them hard enough that nobody ever tries to do this again. But I think it takes some time. This is an enormous shock, and the system, I think, takes a little while to get in gear. I must say, though, that to hear members of Congress complain about the intelligence service when the budgets have been too small, when for the last 25 years we've adopted rules that were tighter and tighter and stricter, that made it virtually impossible for the American intelligence agencies to penetrate these kind of groups. I think that if the Congress really wants to be helpful, they need to pass some immediate action that strengthens our intelligence capability, and instead of playing a blame game, they need to take some responsibility for strengthening and enhancing our intelligence. And then I think the administration has to reach out around the world and make quite clear that we are going to go after whoever did this, and that people can decide either to be with the terrorist or to be with the Americans, but there's not going to be any middle ground, and there's not going to be any neutrality in the process of getting even. This will turn out to be vastly worse in human life than Pearl Harbor, and we have to keep refocusing. This is an act of war. This is not an accident. It's not an act of God. This is an act of war deliberately created by a group of people who were determined to hurt the United States.
And yet they could be a relatively small group. How do you strike back at a country when you may not be able to pin down exactly who within that country?
Let me say flatly, I don't believe this was done by a relatively small group. I don't think you could have trained and prepared for this mission. I don't think without sanctuaries, without people who were protecting them, without safe areas, without training camps, this was not prepared in a couple of mobile homes by a handful of fanatics. This is a well-financed, systematic act and could not be sustained without the support of some very major states. And we have to make clear that we will not tolerate any nation harboring training grounds, preparation areas, or known fugitives, and that we will exert whatever level of pressure and force is necessary to get those people released. Bin Laden has been a known opponent of the United States for 8 years. And we have not exerted the kind of pressure we're capable of. This is an act of war against the American people, against freedom, as the President said, and I think we have to react on behalf, as we did in 1941 after Pearl Harbor. We have to react with total effort to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Newt, I know that you are a historian. Perhaps you can fill us in a bit later about reaction financially throughout America and the world after Pearl Harbor. But let me bring in now our managing business editor, Neil Cavuto, who is here. Neil, all of the stock markets continue to be closed today, correct?
Right. The first was talk that they would open later. They decided not to open at all. Trading in Europe has now since stopped. The markets there were hit and hit hard. It's probably a good thing in retrospect the markets never opened here. They would have collapsed at the open, anywhere from a 300 to 500 point opening had that occurred. Of course, this is the financial center of the world here, not just the New York metropolitan area in the United States, but of the world. This was the home of Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. It takes up about a tenth of the lease space in those two towers that are now no more. We should also emphasize that the New York Mercantile Exchange is here. A great deal of oil and gold, even some currency trading, was done out of these buildings. It is also interesting to note that as this all hit the fan, the dollar was tumbling here as the world markets began to sense from this that the United States was in serious, serious trouble, and then this bastion of security was maybe in some doubt. Typically in times of strife, people run to the dollar as sort of a safe haven. They did just the opposite today, and not surprisingly, because terrorism hit our shores. We should also point out some of the reverberations from this. We have not gotten any indications from the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ or any other financial markets if or even when they're going to open anytime soon. The feeling seems to be that they might resume sometime tomorrow, but again, that is not a given. We should emphasize here as well that this is very much royal trading abroad. All the major markets were down appreciably before they shut for business, anywhere from 5 to 7% losses on concerns that the world's greatest superpower has a terrorist problem on its hands. Now, where has that money been going? Interestingly enough, it's lifted the price of oil. There's a serious concern that we might go tit for tat into the Middle East on concerns whether this is Osama bin Laden or some Middle Eastern terrorist group, and that this might lift oil prices as a result. We should say that at last check, oil had shot up better than $6 a barrel, now to close to $32 a barrel. So the financial pain, besides the obvious physical pain, could be quite pronounced. And it's something we're watching very closely for you, because if the intent here was symbolic, that is going after a United Airlines plane and an American Airlines plane, then also attacking the financial mecca of the universe was just as symbolic and perhaps longer term more telling. Rick Leventhal was literally in the center of the storm. He joins us now out of downtown New York with the latest. Rick.
Well, it's an eerie scene. It's almost eerily quiet now, except for an occasional ambulance flying by. And just a short time ago, we saw some doctors in scrubs heading on small vehicles towards the World Trade Center, which is still, or what's left of it, still smoking down the street here. Police have cordoned off the entire area surrounding it. The only vehicles passing through now are police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances, and construction vehicles like that. We just had a fleet of ambulances head into the scene. They were staged behind us here. They just went in, which suggests that perhaps they're getting closer to the base of the World Trade Center, where there might be many injured waiting to be rescued, in fact. And joining us now is a former detective with the New York City Police Department, worked with the Commissioner's Office. I know you're very familiar with crisis management. Tom Ruskin just came back from the base of the World Trade Center. Describe for us what you saw there.
There's a lot of fire, a lot of debris. The facade of the World Trade Center is all brought down and hanging there in an eerie type of sight that you would expect to see in a movie. Fire is burning around it. Emergency crews are staged in the area but can't get close to it because of the fire and the chance that the debris may come down.
What can we expect to happen next?
Well, after they search for survivors, possible survivors, what will happen is the FBI will take over the investigation. The FBI will launch a massive investigation, as the President has told us this morning, which will definitely go up to Boston, where the planes originated, and thereafter go wherever the trail may lead.
You're familiar with the way the city handles these types of terrorist attacks. You handled the last bombing at the World Trade Center. What's going on right now in the hearts and minds of New York City's finest?
Well, what's going on is trying to rescue those people who may be left behind, underneath the rubble, around the area, people who have been hurt. Hospitals have gone to a full state of alert in their triage areas. A block from here, we have a firehouse that is acting as a triage area so people can go in there and be treated with medical personnel. The city is on a high state of alert relative to the medical casualties that we may have.
Do we have to work under the assumption that this is not the end? Is that the way the police department and all the other agencies handle this?
Well, the military has gone on their highest state of alert. We don't know if it's over. We don't know. We know that all planes have been grounded throughout the country at this point in time, and thereafter each step that has been planned for will take effect.
A lot of people might say, well, New York City should have been ready for this. The police department, everybody else should have known that something like this might happen. Was the department prepared? Did it have a plan in place?
The city constantly trains and retrains. The Office of Emergency Management does nothing but train and retrain and get ready for something like this. But we live in a very free society where our gates are open, where people come in to visit. Terrorism has always been a possibility in the United States because we don't live under the tight control of other countries. So a plane hitting the World Trade Center or two planes hitting the World Trade Center was something that could happen. They are trained for it. I don't think that anyone would ever expect it to happen. Two planes in one day in one city, another plane to hit the Pentagon, another plane to crash in Philadelphia.
All right, Tom Ruskin, thanks a lot for joining us. We're hearing that there's a run on a lot of grocery stores in New York City, Upper East Side in particular, where people are starting to panic and thinking they might not be able to get food and supplies and that sort of thing. And obviously the message is not to panic and not to take these kinds of actions. Also, I want to point out they're looking for blood. They need blood donors, and they're asking people if you're able to donate blood to go to a number of locations in New York City to do just that. So something that everyone should think about. Reporting live in Lower Manhattan, I'm Rick Leventhal. Now back to you.
All right, Rick, thanks very much. Let's get an update now from Shepard Smith in the Fox Newsroom. Shepard?
John, I want to get you updated on a lot of information that has been coming through. This now coming from the Associated Press, which has just been handed to me. An update coming from AP with editor of a London-based Arabic newspaper saying he received a warning from associates of Osama bin Laden but did not take them seriously. Also, a news conference by airport officials is underway in Pittsburgh. The governor of Pennsylvania will be addressing his state in just a moment through the facilities of Fox News. I also want to let you know, we know more about the president's travels today. You may remember as all of this happened, President Bush was in Florida waiting for an education conference. He was flown then immediately. They put him in the air initially with no initial decision about where he would go. They took him to a very high altitude, according to reports. His jet, Air Force One, was accompanied by and flanked by U.S. military fighter jets. Then a decision was made to put him down in Shreveport, Louisiana, where he made the statement. I can tell you that he has now spoken with Mrs. Bush, who is in a bunker, as it is being described, a hideout bunker huddled around a single television set in this hideout, channel surfing for the latest news, according to one person who was in there during the time. Osama bin Laden's name has been mentioned here. The Taliban has said throughout the day, rejecting claims that Osama bin Laden may have been involved. There is dancing in the streets in one city on the West Bank, it is now being said. We have videotape, as a matter of fact, which we are efforting to get into New York and should have here shortly, of them handing out candy in the streets and saying that God is dead. Now, this as an aside, in June, a United States judge had set this Wednesday, tomorrow, as the sentencing date for a bin Laden associate for his role in the bombing of a U.S. embassy in Tanzania that killed 213 people. So an associate of bin Laden would have been sentenced tomorrow in Manhattan at a courthouse just across the street from the World Trade Center. No one from the U.S. Attorney's Office could be reached today to comment on whether the sentencing is still on. In the West Bank city of Nablus, thousands of Palestinians celebrating now, chanting God is great, distributing candy to passers-by. As we speak at this moment, the death toll continues to rise in Lower Manhattan. We had a quote earlier this day from a man, a senator, actually a congressman, who had been inside Washington, D.C. police headquarters. He is a Democrat from Virginia, Representative Jim Moran, who came out of the Capitol Police headquarters and said to our cameras, the estimated death toll now 10,000 out of New York, and says the attack on the Pentagon, that there were undoubtedly deaths as well. The Pentagon still on fire as we speak in Lower Manhattan, still working to clean up the mess and find any potential survivors. Rick Leventhal mentioned just a moment ago this idea that there are fears at least that panic may spread. Rest assured, in much of the city of Manhattan, there is some degree of edgy calm. There are not streets, there are not cabs in the streets. There are not cars making their way around. The bridges and tunnels to this island city are shut. You have to realize, as sentiment goes against Osama bin Laden, the people who drive those cabs have suddenly made themselves scarce. There is no public transportation to speak of aside from buses in Manhattan. The subways are shut down. The major buildings, at least in our area in the center of Manhattan, have just been ordered by the New York City Police Department to be evacuated of all non-essential personnel. So the situation as we know it now is this. The tens of thousands of people who work in skyscrapers, which were not leveled today, have been coming out of those skyscrapers into the streets with no way of getting transportation anywhere else within the city and no way to exit the city of Manhattan. Therefore, they gather on street corners, talking on cell phones. Outside 54th Street, just down the street from here. We could see them at 42nd Street from the roof of our 45-story building here. Outside all the major points where transportation would normally be available. Grand Central Station, the gateway to New York City by subway and by train. Penn Station, where buses were coming in, all shut down. And again, a plea for calm. So many of these people who are sitting around in Manhattan with nothing to do are urged now to donate blood because the situation in Lower Manhattan requires that a lot of blood come forward. We are getting reports from every state in the United States now, repeated ones through the Associated Press, about the way each state is now reacting. All government headquarters now on high alert. We are on Delta alert right now in the United States, which means our military is at a level as if war had been declared against the United States. There is no higher state of alert in the United States of America than is underway right now. Delta. David Schuster's at the Pentagon, keeping watch there. Rick Leventhal in downtown Manhattan. As the facts come in, we'll bring them to you from the newsroom. John, back to you.
All right, Shepard, thanks very much. Want to get an update now from Lower Manhattan. Molly Falconer is at St. Vincent's Hospital, where the dead and injured are being taken. Molly?
It's a terrible scene here, John. Over 300 people have volunteered to go inside and give blood. Hundreds are coming in here to St. Vincent's Hospital, treating for everything from heart attacks to smoke inhalation to severe burns. And I'm here with Dr. Robert Lurch, who's been inside all day. Can you tell us what's been going on?
Basically inside there's all types of injuries, from very minor injuries to very serious injuries. The hospital is very well organized. People are being triaged into the appropriate situations, whether it be a minor cut or an abrasion or asthma or heart attacks or stroke or whatever.
Have you got what you need, and is there a sense of panic, or is it calm?
No, I think everything is basically under control. There's every imaginable specialist in there. People are just waiting to do whatever they can, and things are very well taken care of at this point.
Okay. Is there anything you can tell us about what patients can do? Can people volunteer? Can they come here to ask about loved ones? It's obviously a scene that's been in chaos.
Unfortunately, at this point, I don't think really anybody knows anything.
Okay.
At this point, people are just being taken care of, and as far as in a global sense, how many people are hurt, how many people no one has a clue.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll let you go back to your work. Okay. Family members can call St. Vincent's Hospital. Press conference is going to go on around 3 o'clock today, and a list is being compiled and released. Nothing is formal yet. All is in chaos. We'll keep a watch on it here. Back to you.
Molly Falconer, thanks very much. The mayor of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani, is on the phone with us now. Mr. Mayor, do we have any idea yet the number of casualties?
We don't know the number of casualties. We know it's going to be a large number of people that were seriously injured and that died. And there's no way at this point of knowing or even focusing on that. The effort right now is to save as many people as possible. And we have thousands of emergency workers doing that right now. And we have, from the police department, the fire department, the emergency services, the governor has alerted and put on standby the National Guard, and they should be able to relieve us later this afternoon. I believe that's going to be a number like 1,500, 1,700 National Guard. And we also have the urban search and rescue teams, 3 of them, that are coming to New York to help assist our police department and our fire department. So that's really the focus right now has to be.
I hate to
how many people can we rescue?
Right. I hate to wonder how many of your people, how many police and firefighters were there around the base of the Twin Towers when they began collapsing.
I am very worried about them, and saw some of them rush in and go in, and was with them. We were in a building that was trapped for a while, so when we left, I could see that there were going to. There's no question there are going to be significant casualties to our emergency personnel. It's terrible.
What do you say to the residents of New York City right now? Clearly, Manhattan has been locked down. The transportation in and out is shut off.
First of all, anyone in southern Manhattan should just head north. Just get beyond Canal Street, even further north. Not only is it safer because the smoke condition is still very bad, but it will help us in the emergency efforts if we clear out southern Manhattan, Canal Street south. Everyone should just leave and walk out and walk north, and therefore we'll be able to get the hundreds and hundreds of ambulances that we have to get in and then take people to emergency hospitals out as fast as possible so we can save as many lives as possible to the rest of the people in the city of New York. And just pray. And things are safe and things are secure right now, and let's keep hoping and praying that the casualties are kept to the smallest number possible.
We've put out the appeal, Mr. Mayor, for blood donations from people nationwide, but what else can people do to be helpful?
Anyone that has emergency techniques or emergency expertise can volunteer. Volunteer at the local hospitals. Volunteer to give blood. We're gonna need blood. We have over 170 hospitals in the city of New York. We're going to utilize virtually every single one of them, and the hospitals in the surrounding areas. So anyone that believes that they can donate blood, I'll give you at least one location, 153 East 53rd Street. That's 66th in Amsterdam. The Red Cross actually is at 66th in Amsterdam. so people can volunteer there, or they can go to 153 East 53rd Street and give blood. That would help a great deal. The hospitals are going to need blood. If people have medical backgrounds and they volunteer at the hospitals, that would help, particularly later this afternoon, when the people working there. I was just on the phone with St. Vincent's Hospital. That's under obviously great stress because they're right there. They're the closest hospital. But every hospital is going to need help.
We've had reports, Mr. Mayor, and I don't want to overstate this, but there has been reports from some of our people in the field of a sense of panic beginning to build, of a run on groceries and so forth. What can you do to calm down?
There's no reason at all for anyone to panic. The airspace around New York City is now secure. The federal government has cut off any flights. The fact is that the city of New York is safe right now. It's secure. People should not panic, and they should just go about their lives, and they should have confidence in America and in American democracy. We're going to overcome this, and we're going to prevail. We're going to find out. I'm sure our government's going to find out who did it, and we're going to make an example of it.
You know, of course, there was the mayoral primary and other primaries here in the city of New York. Those have been, we understand, canceled.
Yes, Governor Pataki and I decided about 2 hours ago that it did not make sense today to have an election going on. Among other things, we needed the police personnel that are used during the primary to focus on this rescue effort and assisting each other.
Where were you when this terrible episode began?
Well, when I first was notified, I was in Midtown Manhattan, and I rushed down and saw a good deal of it with my own eyes. Saw the damage that was done to the World Trade Center, saw people jumping from the top of the building. And then we were in 75 Barclay Street, where we set up a temporary command post, and then we were hit by the debris from the collapse of the Trade Center, and were trapped in the building for a short while, then had to evacuate.
75 Barclay Street, is that your command center?
That actually was a ground floor area right next to it. We were using a ground floor area as a temporary command center so that we could be close to where the rescue efforts were taking place. And as we were setting up, and we were on the phone talking to the governor and the White House, and the building collapsed, and we had to evacuate through the basement. It was pretty dicey for a while.
From your long years of experience at the Justice Department, you are not only familiar with trying to govern Manhattan, but also familiar with the operation of terrorist cells. What do you say to the people who inflicted this terrible attack on America?
I have no doubt that we're going to find out who's responsible for this, and that we're going to make an example out of them. And I believe that ultimately the strength of American democracy will prevail. We have to have confidence in ourselves now, and we have to have a sense that our government, a government of democracy and laws, is the future of this world, not this kind of horrible, awful, inhumane way of acting. And I'm sure we'll find out who's responsible for it and make an example out of them.
Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York City, joining us live by telephone. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We know you have much to do today. It'll be a sleepless night and mostly a sleepless week for you, I'm sure, but thank you for taking the time to be with us. Once again, the mayor's words there. If you have medical specialties, if you can in some way contribute to the rescue effort, you're asked to report to your hospital. To be able to do that, ordinary citizens can donate blood at any hospital in the New York area or any of the blood centers that are already established. But please stay away from Lower Manhattan if at all possible. We're joined now by Marine Colonel Oliver North, former Marine Colonel Ollie North, who can give us some of his perspective. Ollie, a lot of people, Newt Gingrich among them, are saying that this is the 21st century Pearl Harbor. Do you agree?
Oh, it's far worse than Pearl Harbor, John. What we've got is a vicious attack on the United States. Interestingly enough, I was on my way back here from Detroit on what may well have been one of the last flights to get off the ground before all U.S. air travel was grounded. Our flight was due to land at National Airport, Reagan National. We were diverted to Dulles. I got a cab driver who was from, of all places, Afghanistan. Paid him heavily. Fox will pick up the tab for that. to get me back here into town. Several remarkable things, John. In spite of the attack here on Washington, remarkable calm as people were courteous but moving quickly to get out of the area. The attack on the Pentagon had activated all of the local law enforcement emergency rescue, to include the Fairfax fire and rescue experts, who are now, I'm told, being prepared to go to New York to assist in any recoveries that can be made up there. As you know, they're experts that worked on the first World Trade bombing and, of course, Oklahoma City. I'm also told that the attack that may have been aimed not at Camp David, but at the National Military Command Center, Fort Detrick, Maryland, the attack that apparently brought down a plane near Somerset, Pennsylvania. And finally, there is talk already here in Washington of postponing or indeed canceling the International Monetary Fund and World Bank conference here at the end of the month, which was scheduled for Washington, and which the city was girding for. In fact, went through an emergency drill last week, which may well have helped some of the response here at this end. No doubt that this is the worst attack against the United States that we have ever experienced. My sense is, John, that there's going to be a call not to treat this as a crime, but to call it what it is, a war, and it may be a call for the Congress to do just exactly that, to make a declaration of war.
Ollie North, thank you. Stay with us if you would, please. Let's get some thoughts on that from another man who knows more than a thing or two about declarations of war. Al Haig, the former general and also former Secretary of State. Is it time to be talking about that? Is it time to declare some kind of a war here, Mr. Secretary?
Well, the terrorists have declared war on us for a number of years now. We simply haven't treated it as a war. I'm sure this very shocking and horrible day will certainly energize that kind of thinking, and I would be for it, certainly. We should declare war on terrorism, and we should take all the actions necessary to stamp it out. And that means working with our allies in close harmony, but also not to be hogtied by moral equivalence arguments which have seemed to dominate our response up till now.
So what kinds of arguments can you see coming out of some kind of a strike against terrorist facilities?
Well, I don't have to draw any pictures there. We've seen it for a number of years. We saw it even dominate our decision to let Saddam Hussein survive the Gulf War, for which we should be very, very have second thoughts on that today. But we also know that bin Laden has made it very clear that this is a war against the United States and Israel, and we should take action accordingly. We haven't done that. And those who are giving them harbor and sanctuary we should talk to in very forceful terms and take action if that's necessary. But for now, we Americans should avoid panic. We should stay united. We should shut up on what I call the recriminations of politically motivated operatives here in Washington, unite behind our elected president, and get on with the task of giving all the resources we can, our prayers, our physical resources, to the victims of this horrible attack and this act of war.
Al Haig, thank you. Stay with us if you would. You mentioned the president, and we want to replay for you now what the president had to say around 12:30 today. The president was taken from Florida to Shreveport.
In some way, all of our lives have been changed today. It all began at 8:45 this morning. And behind us now, the smoke continues to pour out of the area where the Trade Center towers were. They are no more. They collapsed in the hour after the attack, but the smoke continues to pour through that area behind us, about 30 blocks away, in one of those scenes that none of us will ever forget. CNN correspondent Richard Roth has been on the streets here in Lower Manhattan. Richard?
Yes, Aaron, not chaos here. It's almost eerily silent of the march of thousands of New Yorkers evacuating southern Manhattan, looking to go to New Jersey to get off this island. Dazed, stunned, people concerned about loved ones, cell phones not working. New Yorkers are used to coping with a lot of things here. There have been some bombings and hurricanes and calamities, but really nothing like this before. And of course, behind me are the clouds of where the World Trade Center stood, 2 towers built in 1970. A short time ago, a Port Authority police official, the Port Authority is the state unit that runs, in effect, the World Trade Center, those buildings that formerly existed, and one of the police officials there, William Hall, said there is no search going on right now. He said until the fires go out, until it is safe for his people and other rescue workers to go in, they are not moving in there. He said on an average day, the 2 World Trade Center towers get 10,000 people each with 5,000 visitors. A New York City police official told us a short time ago that another triage center is going to be set up here on the west side of Manhattan, 33rd Street area in the Jacob Javits Convention Center. This to handle additional overflow from New York City hospitals, which New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani says have been doing their best in coping with it, but there have been calls for blood. People here walking by me, someone will point to someone and say, this person was in the World Trade Center, just got out. You can hear behind me, there is the roar of military aircraft, the only aircraft you see in the sky. And usually, as New Yorkers will tell you, you can look up at any time and see a plane. They are up in the sky, concerned look from people who gaze upward, shield their eyes to see just what's going on, and an occasional police helicopter. But here in New York City, there is no search going on. William Hall of the Port Authority said we're going to have to wait until we get things all accounted for before we can go in there. Aaron.
Richard, thank you. Richard Roth in Lower Manhattan. Again, just a quick recap for those of you who may just be getting home and hearing these events for the first time. 8:48 this morning, one of those moments that everyone will remember. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles, hijacked, crashed into the First Trade Center tower. At 9:04, the second plane, a United Airlines flight, United 175, Boston to Los Angeles, hit the second tower. About a half hour later, 9:38 Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 77, Washington Dulles Airport to Los Angeles. It crashed into the Pentagon, hitting just short of the Pentagon itself, and perhaps that was most fortunate. And at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time, United Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, crashed about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. Those are the times and the events. They don't begin to describe what has happened. What has happened is not simply a series of moments, but something much larger. Phil Zappetta is with the American Red Cross, and he is on the phone with us. Mr. Zappetta, this is Aaron Brown. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can, Aaron.
Tell me what sort of strain is on the Red Cross's resources right now.
Well, the American Red Cross responded immediately to all areas of this disaster. Right now, our focus is really on disaster relief, providing blood assistance, and any disaster mental health assistance that we can provide around the country to both the survivors and the families who've been involved in this tragedy.
Phil, tell me what that means exactly. I understand the need for blood. Are you setting up shelters for people?
Sure. We have shelters both in New York City and in Washington, D.C. that are set up to help people. There we have disaster mental health counselors that are able to meet with people and to register people as they come in and are trying to get away from the situation. We are set up in New York at Penn Station, at Grand Central Station, and in Washington, D.C. at Fort Belvedere. It is still chaos right now. We are in the process of ramping up our operations. While we did respond immediately, there's so much work to be done, and we're in the process of doing that right now. We have about 50,000 units of blood that are available for the affected areas, and the American Red Cross is looking at mobilizing that right now and putting that into place.
And Phil, as you were speaking, we were able to put up on the screen numbers that people can call if they can help. If you're sitting in Omaha, Nebraska today, is it helpful in this situation to be going to the blood bank and giving blood, or is it too far away to be meaningful?
The message that the American Red Cross is putting out right now is to donate blood. Call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE, GIVELIFE, or visit redcross.org for more information. But giving blood is where our emphasis is right now.
No matter where you are in the country.
Yes, well, no matter where you are in the country, or you can, contact your local hospital if you're not in a Red Cross area, but 1-800-GIVE-LIFE is the best number to call.
Okay, so even if you are far away from the events of today, you can still be helpful, as there is certainly in New York and in Washington, from what Judy said, a serious shortage of blood. The American Red Cross can be helpful. Your local hospital, your local blood bank can be helpful. We suspect before the day is out, fire stations around the country will be involved in these efforts as well. Phil, thank you. Is there anything else, by the way, before I let you go, that you want to say that would be helpful to our viewers or helpful to the Red Cross?
Well, the Red Cross right now and our president, Dr. Bernadine Healy, extend our heartfelt sorrows to all families and everyone that's been affected by this. We just urge people to donate blood.
Thank you very much, Phil, with the American Red Cross. Phil Zappetta with the American Red Cross. CNN's Miles O'Brien has been tracking the flight paths of these 4 planes that were involved. Miles, are you able to hear me in Atlanta?
Yes, I am, Aaron.
And tell me what you've been able to figure out to this point.
Well, as you probably know, Aaron, there are various commercial websites that allow you to track commercial aircraft. Now, if you go to many of them right now, you're not going to get very far because they're being overwhelmed by interest in people. But even if you could get some of the data, we have just learned from the Federal Aviation Administration that every domestic airliner that was in the air is now on the ground. This is unprecedented in aviation history in this country. There's not a plane flying right now. At any given moment, typically there are 4,000 aircraft. Now, let's take a look at what happened on American Airlines Flight 11. Began in Boston, and it took off on time, 81 people aboard, 9 crew members, 9 flight attendants and 2 pilots. And let's sort of track what happened with this flight. As it went across Massachusetts and went down into the Albany area, actually up in the Adirondacks, it took a sharp dogleg. What's interesting about this flight is everything seemed to be normal. Flight at altitude was about 29,000 feet, gaining speed at about 450 knots. It took that sharp dogleg down across the Adirondacks straight for New York. Now, what will be interesting about this as this story unfolds will be, number one, listening to any air traffic control conversations to get a sense of what, if anything, air traffic controllers were saying to this aircraft. Undoubtedly, this was spotted on the radar screens, of course. They had quite a bit of time to watch this plane as it went down toward New York. That's probably at least a 30-minute run there. And during the course of that time, those air traffic controllers in those radar installations, New York Center, as it is called, would have been trying to contact American Airlines Flight 11 to indicate its intentions. It must have been a horrifying scene for them. They were probably trying to clear air traffic out of the area. Clearly, once those tapes become available, we'll have a little bit more knowledge. And if it is possible to locate any of the so-called black boxes, the flight data recorders, cockpit voice recorder out of this particular aircraft, they'll obviously know more about what was going on what must have been a very dramatic flight indeed. Now, this is the first flight. This is the flight that first impacted the first tower of the World Trade Center, and this is the first of 4 that we know about, of course, 4 air hijackings, which led to crashes and obviously a tremendous amount of damage. I'm getting this information from a company called FlightExplorer.com. They are compiling their archival radar information from this morning, and as it becomes available, we'll be able to show you the flight paths of the other 3 aircraft that are suspected in all of this, and we'll bring those to you as soon as we get that. Aaron?
Just a quick practical question. These tapes of the cockpit tower communications, do they exist on the ground?
Yes.
Are they recorded in control towers, and then there's a different set of tapes that exist on the plane?
Exactly. It's important to bring out, there are 2 types of tapes in these incidents. The tapes on the ground are the ones that record the radio transmissions between the ground and the aircraft, and clearly the flight controllers would have been calling this aircraft numerous times, and this would have been the case for the 3 others if they deviated from their courses, trying to get some indication as to what was wrong, why the pilot was changing course so dramatically. Now, what will be interesting to hear is if there is some sort of response from these aircraft. This will give us some clue as to who might have been in control of the plane at the time, or if there might have been some sort of struggle aboard, or if there was just a lack of a struggle. There's a lot of mystery here, obviously. Now, ultimately, as they go through the wreckage in these cases, it's possible that investigators, and there's a good chance because they have emergency locating devices on them, they'll find these so-called black boxes, and on those black boxes there might be much more information which might give authorities some clues as to who might be responsible.
Several different kinds of information. There's technical information in these black boxes, what the airplane was doing in a sense, but there's also communications between the cabin crew that exist on those tapes, what pilot was saying to co-pilot. We might be able to hear, if these tapes are ever located, what the people who took control of these planes, and that's clearly what happened, seems clear that that's what happened, what they were saying. Whether these tapes will ever be found, obviously we don't yet know, but that is part of what will happen in the next days. On this day, what is happening in both Washington and New York and in a field outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is a massive, massive rescue operation, a massive triage operation. Thousands of people, presumably, have been hurt. Many people, we suspect, have died, though many hours now since that first plane hit the Trade Center at 8:48 Eastern Time. We have yet to hear from any official in the city any estimate here in New York of the number of people who have been hurt. We just know that hospitals are inundated, that hospitals are running very low on blood, and they need help here. We know that the National Guard will be coming in here to New York to help in support of the New York Police Department. We would add here that a number of members, and we don't know how many, but after the police and fire responded to these two planes hitting the Trade Center, many police officers, many firefighters, many EMS personnel were in the area when the buildings collapsed. How many of them were hurt, we do not know, but we've been told now by two officials or former officials with the city that any number of people, police and fire officials, have been hurt as well. Judy in Washington, Judy Woodruff. Judy.
And Aaron, just picking up on your conversation with Miles O'Brien a moment ago, and perhaps you all referred to this, and I apologize if I'm repeating, the Associated Press reporting on a passenger that was on United Flight 93. Now, this is the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. About 20 minutes before that plane crashed, a passenger with a cell phone locked in a bathroom actually called an emergency dispatcher and shouted into the cell phone, "We are being hijacked, we're being hijacked." They apparently stayed on the phone with this passenger up until the moment when the passenger heard some sort of a loud noise, and then they lost contact. That's just one more piece of the stories, the many, many, many stories that we are pulling together as we watch these developments in Pennsylvania, here in Washington, and of course in New York City. And you just heard Aaron talking about incomplete information about casualties, what hospitals are dealing with. Now, these numbers I'm going to read you right now are only incomplete. We are just beginning to get this kind of information. We're told at Washington area hospitals right now, 53 injured, at least 3 more casualties on the way, although we have to believe.
If I'm not mistaken, that is a shot of it. People are coming out the bottom of the World Trade Center. This obviously is the evacuation before the building collapsed. Actually coming out more slowly, covered in dust. It doesn't even look like New York. It doesn't look like a New York City street at this point. And it was approximately, I would say, maybe an hour after the initial impact, which was at about 8:45, that the first building collapsed. Approximately an hour. We were all watching it here in our news studios in horror. The second plane hit at 9:03, so not exactly immediately following. All right, now we're going to watch for, this is the shot of the Pentagon, where another plane, and as Scott just told you, at this juncture, we are not sure which plane hit the Pentagon. Initially, we thought 2 American Airlines jets had hit the 2 World Trade Center towers. They now have backed away from that, and we now wonder if the United Airlines jet, which had crashed, but at an undisclosed location, United Airlines wasn't commenting, may have crashed into the Pentagon, or, in fact, another plane crashed United Airlines crashed into the World Trade Center, and it was an American Airlines jet who crashed here. This is Scott Baker with more. Scott?
Right, Sally. We are trying to figure out again which plane exactly ended up where. Right now, though, we saw images earlier of Rudy Giuliani walking through the catastrophe zone with the face mask. He's now having a news conference along with the New York Governor George Pataki talking about the devastation. Let's listen in on the network coverage.
Just to make certain that nothing further happens. This has been a very, very difficult and traumatic day for the people of the United States and the people of the city. And I think that it's an act that shows that the federal government is going to do everything they can to support us and help us.
Can you give us an idea of the extent of the rescue effort that's going on right now in Lower Manhattan? The scope of this thing, this operation?
There are over 1,000 rescue workers.
I'm standing on the corner watching, taking pictures. You can see the wings of the plane come from the south. It hit the middle of the second building.
We're walking the dogs and we saw a plane flying really low, a small jet, and it flew directly into the World Trade Center, and then all the pieces fell to the bottom in seconds.
It was chaos.
Just get out of the tunnel and it blew.
Built in the mid-1960s, the World Trade Center towered over Manhattan. Each tower 110 stories. Over 40,000 people work in the two buildings. It is still unclear how many people were in the towers when the planes crashed and how the evacuation was going an hour later when we watched aghast as the towers collapsed. The skyline of Manhattan has changed forever. New York's Twin Towers are gone.
Pictures this of the second of the two World Trade Center towers collapsing.
Oh my God. There's been a huge explosion. Everyone's running in the other direction. There's been a huge explosion. Everyone's running for their lives, literally. Police, media. I see a woman pushing a baby carriage.
No, I'm all right. Let me I saw the building falling down.
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
Saw people jumping from the building.
I had just gotten out of the building. I was crossing the street when I heard some rumbling. I saw someone coming off the top of the building. I just ran. I didn't know where to go. My first reaction was to go down into a subway stop just to get some cover because I felt this cloud of all this stuff, the stuff coming down, the debris, and I thought that was the best, smartest thing, but I got stuck in there for a while. It was pitch dark.
And now all we are left with are questions. Who could have done this? What is the toll in human lives?
What happened was I was down in the basement. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang, and the elevator doors blew open. Some guy was burnt up, so I dragged him out. His skin was all hanging off. So I dragged him out and I pulled him out of the parking lot. This was what was left on it.
And what will happen now?
Well, we showed you what happened early this morning, and now you are looking at live pictures at 2:17 a.m. Eastern Time in New York City. This is all that is left of what once proudly stood as the World Trade Center Twin Towers, each tower 110 feet. These two towers containing at least 40,000 people working, going about their day. Now, this is it.
Site of a massive search and rescue operation. You know, 3 of the planes involved in Tuesday's attacks were all headed for Los Angeles International Airport. And that's exactly where John Dupree is for us right now. John.
And that's exactly why Los Angeles International Airport was and is considered to be a possible terrorist target. And so even now in the 11 o'clock hour Western time, Pacific Standard Time, when there would be the last bank of airliners coming in for a landing, the skies above are dark and empty. The only sound here at this massive facility is the recorded public address system echoing announcements to no one in particular, law enforcement authorities and us, the only people who can hear the announcements today. Well, we can tell you that LAX is closed. 178 planes which were staged for takeoff are still grounded. Every plane, every building, every terminal here has been searched and declared safe by the ATF and the FBI, but nobody goes anywhere until the Federal Aviation Administration comes out tomorrow and tells us that they can get back to business as usual. Those 3 flights headed here meant that a lot of the people on board those 3 airliners were from here, so family and loved ones began showing up earlier today. They were whisked away by United Airlines and American Airlines officials, taken to briefing rooms where they were informed of what happened, they were consoled, and they are now being helped. But this airport was locked down, as was San Francisco International, which was the destination of the 4th plane which crashed over Pennsylvania. Up and down the West Coast, from the border crossing at San Diego to the Space Needle at Seattle, Washington, either under lockdown, heightened security, or completely evacuated. 54 Army Corps of Engineer dams throughout the western states have been placed under lockdown, from St. Louis to the West Coast. That may give you a sense for what we mean when we say, without fear, that we're overstating the story. What happened in Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, and there in New York hit hard here on the West Coast. Everybody felt it, even this far away. Live at Los Angeles International, John Dupree reporting. Now back to you, Rick and Laurie.
All right, John, thank you very much. As we look at some more live pictures from lower Manhattan. As John mentioned, a 4th hijacked plane crashed in western Pennsylvania, and there is now word that air traffic controllers out there were warned that a plane was about to crash. Here's the latest now from that Pennsylvania crash.
Crash investigators inspect a 20-foot crater in a rural cornfield in Somerset County. The point of impact for one of 4 commercial airliners today hijacked by terrorists.
It appears that the plane landed here in that dark trench down here near the tree line and proceeded on into the wooded area. From what I can...
United Airlines Flight 93 left Newark this morning bound for San Francisco. Instead, the 757 jet nosedived into this rural area near Shanksville, about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh.
When I heard the noise, I got up and I had my phone in my hand and I saw the plane. By the time I was out here and the plane was heading nosediving.
Everyone on board died, including 38 passengers and 7 crew members. This woman says she saw the jetliner go down.
On impact, you could feel the impact and the fireball and like the smoke ball. It was so fast within seconds of each other.
At nearby Johnstown Airport, air traffic controllers got word just before the jetliner went down. They were told to evacuate the air traffic control tower.
We could not visually see the tower or visually see the aircraft from the tower at 15 miles out, which is quite unusual for an aircraft that size. So we did, several of us stayed to see what was going to happen, to see if, in fact, the aircraft was going to come in closer.
Governor Tom Ridge toured the crash scene today. He is calling this tragedy an act of cowardice.
There is no rational explanation because we don't resolve our differences in this country that way.
All right, well, terrorism hitting America, the impact visible on the New York skyline. We saw the 2 World Trade Center towers, each 110 stories, simply collapsing. These dramatic pictures coming from the New York Post. Of course, we've been seeing these all over the television networks and in the newspapers. It is almost indescribable. The New York skyline forever changed because of this acts of terrorism. All right, well, it is visible in the New York skyline, but what about the economic impact on the world? These are the questions that will be asked in the coming days and weeks. Fox News' senior business correspondent Karen Gibbs joins us now live from Fox Central. And Karen, we're already getting reports of immediate impact on the airline industry.
Oh, yeah, Laurie, you're already starting to see it because, this was a lot of business and leisure travel. These 266 passengers are really caught blindsided pretty much, and that's going to put a chill on any type of business leisure travel going forward. In fact, the airline industry expects to see as much as a 50% drop-off in business and might put them in a cash crunch through the rest of this month. That, of course, is going to really affect not just the travel but the tourism business and certainly the economy. A lot of people, or economists that I'm talking to, are now saying that this one act of terrorism could plunge the whole world into a recession as everybody pulls back. We've already talked about crude oil being higher. It's up over $1.55 in London, over $31 per barrel. Gold is still holding on to a substantial number of gains. It's up 15%. $15 now at $287, but still we're seeing the rest of the world stock markets down. Japan's off almost 7%, Singapore down over 8%, and Hong Kong off 9.5%. Malaysia's market was closed. You talked about the Twin Towers being closed. Now Germany's DAX market opening is being called into question. Their biggest office there, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, the Messerturm, has been evacuated as well. And the Financial Times of the FTSE 100 index due to open in less than an hour in London. That could be very, very rocky with no U.S. guidance whatsoever. But we do have word that Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill is en route from Japan's Tokyo airport. He arrived there yesterday after a 4-day trip in China. Now, there's no information on how, when, or where he is going to arrive in the United States, but he is prepared to be back in Washington and hopefully in touch with Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan, who also says he is prepared to add more liquidity to world markets to help smooth out any type of financial dislocations that could be seen. Laurie?
All right, senior financial correspondent Karen Gibbs, as always, thank you so much.
It is impossible to underestimate just how devastating a day it was after those 4 terrorist attacks.
That's right. 4 U.S. aircrafts literally used as weapons. The World Trade Center completely destroyed and severe damage inflicted on the Pentagon.
There was another one. We just saw another one. We just saw another one apparently go. Another plane just flew into the second tower. This has to be deliberate, folks.
We saw a shadow. It looked like a plane. Next thing we know, it was boom, boom, and the floor started shaking.
We just felt a big explosion.
Yeah, David, we are looking at the replay of what happened that you're describing. It happened just moments ago. It sure appears that the building simply collapsed.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
Everything came down. Couldn't see, couldn't breathe. It's terrible. I never seen nothing like it.
I saw the building just coming down.
We have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism.
Just saw a burst, a big burst. And then I saw people jumping out of the buildings.
This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history. And yet I think it can be its finest hour.
Everybody took cover to run. We ran down the subway, but the dust followed us down there.
I used to work in the 105th floor of the World Trade Center. Are we going to go down there? And I'm in shock. I know a lot of people are still up there. I mean, I don't know where they are. Of course.
Our thoughts and prayers are with those families and those injured and those who are the casualties of today's attack. We also remember those thousands of people who are rescue workers. We'd ask now that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Todd Connor. This news just coming to us over the AP wire. It's actually a story that's going to be appearing in the Boston Herald. It has to do with possible suspects in this case. Authorities in Massachusetts, it says, identified at least 5 Arab men as suspects in yesterday's attack. In Tuesday's attack, launched from Logan International Airport, seizing in the central parking garage at Logan a car filled with Arabic language flight training manuals, according to sources for the Boston Herald. 2 of the men whose passports were traced to the United Arab Emirates were brothers, one of whom was a trained pilot, a source told the Boston Herald. At least 2 other suspects flew to Logan yesterday from Portland, Maine, where authorities believe they had traveled after crossing over from Canada recently. The car was rented from National Rental Car. It was secured by the FBI, and authorities have prepared a search warrant for it. But once again, authorities searching Logan International Airport have apparently seized a car, according to sources telling this to the Boston Herald newspaper. This car filled with Arab language flight training manuals. One of those men apparently connected to that car, a trained pilot. We're going to have much more on this breaking story that we're just getting in here to Fox News Channel a little bit later in this hour. I'm Todd Connor. This is a Fox News Alert.
All right, thank you, Todd. Well, until today, the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 was the worst act of terrorism on American soil. Not anymore.
The attack was carried out by Jap torpedo planes together with dive bombers.
We went to war after terror came to our shores on the wings of Japanese bombers.
The bomb hit caused the Arizona to blow up.
We were terrified when car bombs exploded at our embassy in Beirut, but we prayed it wouldn't happen again on our soil until it did. We were a country under siege when a bomb went off in the basement of the World Trade Center.
It sounded like a bomb, then it sounded like something was falling, but it felt like an earthquake.
One guy came running out on fire. He was smoking, he was on fire.
It was terror in the heartland when a truck loaded with fertilizer blew up at the federal building in Oklahoma City, and we were outraged when we found out the man who did it was an American. The bombing in Centennial Park rocked the Olympic Games as the world watched, and the simultaneous attacks on our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania brought fear that terrorism was coming close to America. Then the USS Cole, a Navy vessel, bombed while it stopped to refuel in Aden, Yemen. But nothing could prepare us for today. 4 planes hijacked, each with a target. 2 to the World Trade Center, the 2 biggest buildings in New York City. 1 to the Pentagon, the heart of our military. The 4th crashed near Pittsburgh. Reportedly, it was heading for Camp David, the presidential retreat, and perhaps ironically, the location where the Camp David Middle East Peace Accord was signed. There is no doubt that terror has come to our shores, and the big question is who? Who is so full of hate that they could cause such destruction? The Afghanistan government, the Taliban, accused in the past of providing sanctuary for terrorist Osama bin Laden, claims they and he are not responsible. David Asman, Fox News.
It is now 32 minutes after the hour. We're about 17.5 hours since this nightmare began. I'm Rick Fulbaum.
And I'm Lori Dew. Thank you for joining us here on the Fox News Channel. Let's go over what happened on a day that really rivals any of the darkest days in our American history. First, a passenger jet crashes into the World Trade Center, and the race to put out the fire begins.
But then just minutes later, a second plane flies around to the adjacent tower and slams into it, and suddenly America is under attack. And the attack actually extends beyond New York City. The Pentagon, America's home for national security, is ripped by a 3rd plane crash.
And then a permanent gaping hole in America's security and its skyline is made as Tower 1 of the World Trade Center crumbles to the ground.
Followed moments later by the second tower sinking into the ground, killing thousands, including those would-be heroes who had come in to rescue the people who were injured by those plane crashes. And just when it seemed like the worst was over, a fourth plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. We later find out that it could have possibly been headed for the White House. And then these haunting images from Jerusalem. Palestinians smiling, cheering, celebrating in the streets, rejoicing in the deaths of thousands and thousands of Americans.
A nation reverberating in shock. A nation stunned, looking to its leadership, and President Bush promises to punish anyone and everyone responsible and any country that may protect these terrorists. Congress rallying together. Partisanship a non-factor today, standing together on the Capitol steps, singing God Bless America, promising to cooperate and to bring those responsible to justice.
And now the rescue missions. New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani says that there are people alive underneath the rubble in Lower Manhattan, promising that the city will do whatever it can to get to them. And those search and rescue operations underway right now. Let's get the latest on those operations where the Twin Towers used to be with one of the first reporters who was able to report live from the scene, my colleague Rick Leventhal. Rick.
Rick, Lori, hard to believe it's some 17 and a half hours since the planes hit the towers, 16 and a half hours since the towers came crashing to the ground. There is still thick smoke in the air over the scene, still apparently some hot spots in there. Firefighters are continuing to put water on the remains, the rubble of the World Trade Center buildings and area buildings that were also in smoke and flames, trying to cool things down. And as you mentioned, in the meantime, there is a search and rescue underway. We're told as many as 2,000 people are searching or will be searching or have been searching through that area looking for possible survivors. We have heard reports that at least 2 people may have called relatives using cell phones, apparently from the basement of one of the 2 World Trade Center towers, covered with rubble, buried under the debris, but able to get cells out and call people and tell them that they were alive and okay. We have also heard that there may have been police officers trapped as well, and we also heard that one of those officers may in fact have been rescued from the rubble already. We're not sure if more people have been located, where that rescue effort stands at this point, but again, we have been told that as many as 2,000 people are searching for possible survivors. Want to give you our mass cam look at the scene. If you haven't seen it already, this is a shot from our camera above a pole, above our satellite truck, that shows you Church Street right in front of the World Trade Center complex. An eerie sight with those 2 large pieces of one of the towers sitting right in the middle of the street, and the broken remains of the building littered all around it. Emergency vehicles all over the place, as well as police, fire, and other rescue personnel, obviously trying to get the situation under control as best they can. As many as 300 firefighters still missing, many of them presumed dead. At least 30 police officers also missing, and many of them presumed dead. And thousands of office workers who were inside the World Trade Center also feared dead. Those bodies likely to be recovered, many of them starting first thing in the morning as the smoke clears and the sun comes up, and they're able to move the heavy equipment into the area to begin moving the rubble and getting to the people who are buried beneath it. We also have pictures we can show you that were just shot a short time ago, raw video shot from the West Side Highway towards the scene where these buildings collapsed. Again, another vantage point demonstrating how awful this collapse was. We've been talking to numerous firefighters and police officers, some of whom went into the buildings before they collapsed. I talked to a couple firefighters not long ago who were on the 21st floor, making sure that people got out of the building okay. These firefighters reporting that the evacuation, for the most part, was orderly. And in fact, I spoke to a guy early this morning, soon after the buildings were hit by the planes, who told me he climbed down 77 flights of stairs and told me at that time that things were relatively orderly in the building as people were evacuating. But there were many people who could not get out. People who were killed in the initial explosion, others who were trapped on burning floors with nowhere to go. And those are people who you've probably seen the horrible pictures leaping from the building, from high floors, giving up all hope of surviving and just leaping to their deaths. The area, again, here in Lower Manhattan, completely sealed off by police. They are not allowing any vehicles in except for the firefighters and emergency workers and construction workers on scene. Again, these fire trucks are continuing to circle the area. There's one right behind me now. The area of Lower Manhattan off limits to anyone who doesn't belong here. The police have said if you're caught here with no reason to be here, you will be arrested. They're urging everyone to stay out of the area so that they can do the work that they need to do to try and clean things up, look for survivors, and recover the victims' bodies. Rick, Lori, back to you.
Rick, how is it if the fact that the lights are out in Lower Manhattan, how is that affecting the search and rescue operations?
Well, they did cut power to this area, power and gas, because of fears that there might be more fires or explosions. But that, I don't believe, is hampering rescue efforts because they do have generators out here. They have their own big lights. In fact, we saw the National Guard pull in here not long ago with trailers of generators and large lights attached to them. You know, the vehicles, you can see this fire vehicle right here has lights on it. They've lit up the area over there near the scene of the building collapse, so they do have light with which to work, but they have turned off the power, as you mentioned, in this area to avoid fires and that sort of thing. So anyone who lives here is basically out of luck as far as that goes.
Rick Leventhal, thank you, Rick.
All right, we want to take you now to St. Vincent's Hospital, the hospital that is closest to where the World Trade Center stood until this morning, where upwards of 350 victims have been taken. Derry Alexander is standing by with the latest. And Derry, despite this tragedy, you have been reporting that folks are in high spirits there.
Well, yeah, Lori, if there's at all a bright light to the situation, we can certainly say here at the hospital they are very well prepared. One of the things we were talking about earlier is the fact that this hospital, as you were saying, close to the Twin Towers, or what was the Twin Towers, straight shot up 6th Avenue, straight shot up north from that area, the Wall Street, the financial center. So they are ready. They've been ready. They went through this in '93. Obviously, this is a much greater magnitude, but they've had to deal with, you know, a huge tragedy like that before. Earlier today, I was told that there were as many as 100 beds laid out in front of the hospital, just waiting to take people. The mood has been very positive here. It's been one of determination. It's been very hopeful. They want people to come. They want to receive people, because that means that obviously, you know, we're thinking that there are people still alive. Unfortunately, I have to say at this moment, we are just in a waiting state, and so are a lot of the staff. You got to think that when buildings like that are coming down, we're talking stories and stories of I mean, so much debris. So if in fact there are people still there, they are underneath so much debris. So it obviously will take quite a while to get them out, and we're hoping that's exactly why it's taking a while to see patients come up here. One thing I can tell you, I know David Lee Miller had a lot of information to offer, and one thing I believe he said earlier was he was talking about police officers, and he said he had heard that a police officer had been pulled. I can confirm for you that 2 police officers were pulled from the scene, and they were brought here to St. Vincent's Hospital, and they were treated, and they are okay. So that's certainly a bit of good news. Also, earlier, we saw 2 priests actually come out of an EMS truck, and they were treated, and they were walking covered in debris, just like everybody else. They were covered in debris, but they were certainly walking, and you know, they look like obviously they would be okay. But other than that, I mean, it is really, the scene out here is really one of quiet, just waiting and hoping that there are people to rescue. We've heard as a total of injuries throughout Manhattan was about 1,500. I know I said earlier, I said 362, that's what, or 365, that's what this hospital has received. We heard overall about 1,500 ratio to 50,000. Once again, that's not very good. But once again, I'm saying, you know, we're just waiting for people to arrive. Back to you guys.
All right, Derry Alexander reporting from St. Vincent's Hospital. Thanks very much.
All right, let's check on one of the other targets of this attack, the Pentagon. Brian Wilson is standing by with an update from there. As once again, we take a look at what is left of the World Trade Center. Let's head down to the Pentagon and Brian Wilson. Brian.
Well, you know, basically you have to start from the beginning and tell this story. A plane leaves Dulles Airport, which is about 25 miles west of Washington. It is hijacked. It apparently at one point, some people believe, was headed directly for the White House. For whatever reason, it didn't go there. It made a big circle, and under full throttle in a dive, at a very steep dive, it slammed into the south side of the Pentagon at 9:40 this morning. A ball of flame. There was smoke in the air. It took many hours to bring the fire under control. And now there is a gaping hole that penetrates from the outer ring, the E ring of the Pentagon, all the way into the C ring. 3 of the 5 rings on the south side of the building are damaged as a result of this plane flying in. There were 67 people on board that plane. All 67 are thought to have perished, of course. What we don't know is how many people were inside the building. The Arlington County Fire Department has suggested to us that as many as 850 people could have been working in that area. And they say the death toll could run as high as 800. They also suggest that it could be as low as 100. And they say they just don't know exactly how long it will take to get a firm number. However, tomorrow they will begin first a search and a rescue effort, and then as the day progresses, they expect that to turn into a recovery. We should also tell you that according to the authorities here, they believe that it is possible for survivors to be in this structure. They believe that the way the building collapsed in a pancake type way, that there could be people in crevices throughout this building. They've heard nothing so far, but they are holding out hope that someone survived inside this building. At the Pentagon, they are at DEFCON Delta, which is the highest military alert threat rate they can be at. And they say basically that they will stay on that till further notice. And although you cannot see military jets flying around the area, they are in the air. There is what is known as an air cap over Washington, D.C. That is to protect the nation's capital and the president from any other threats from the air. We continue to watch and monitor what's going on here at the Pentagon. A dark day, but there is one bright note to point to, and that is that throughout it all, the Pentagon remained in operation, directing the military around the world from this location, even though a portion of the building was indeed burning. Back to you, Rick. Lori?
All right, Brian Wilson at the Pentagon. Once again, a live picture of Lower Manhattan, what's left of the World Trade Center. A deadly assault on America, and now a lot of people are asking, how could someone commit such a horrible act? Joining us now to talk about that is Brian Levin, director at the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University. He is also a former New York City police officer. Mr. Levin, thanks very much for talking to us. And, you know, I said, how could one person, but clearly we're not talking about one person here, are we?
No, we're talking about a coordinated and professional effort here that took a long time to plan, could be even more than a year. This was executed with dastardly efficiency, and it's one of those things that those of us who track terrorism had feared. A lot of times the terrorists in the past have tried to do things, and they were more like Keystone Cops. These individuals were people who were very well trained, and they trained for a multitude of different things. They would fall under a category of terrorists that we would call ideologically motivated terrorists, and they're probably the most dangerous of these ideologically motivated, and that is the theologically or religiously motivated, these zealots. And again, this zealots don't belong to any one religion, but in this particular case, these people were committed to their cause and willing to die for it, in fact, wanted to achieve martyrdom against an entity like the United States, which is considered the great Satan. These are the hardest kinds of individuals to deter because they don't care about losing their lives. In fact, that's part of the plan.
So who are we talking about, Mr. Levin? Is there a short list? Of course, everyone is thinking about Osama bin Laden. Some people are actually saying Osama bin Laden, although no government officials on the record as of yet. But is there a short list that you could tell us about?
Sure. I think Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda is at the top of the list. Look, this is someone who comes from a family that is quite wealthy, a billionaire dynasty out of Saudi Arabia. It also resembles the types of attacks we've seen before that were attempted. Give you an example. About 10 years ago, there was a plot to blow up the arterial highways and bridges coming into New York from New Jersey. Also to blow up the Diamond District, the United Nations and the Empire State Building. It was thwarted. There was also a plot to blow up 9 airliners over the Pacific. there are very few entities out there that have the motive and opportunity and resources to carry it out. To be sure, there are people throughout the world who loathe and indeed have extreme hatred for the United States, but I'd say bin Laden's group has to be at the top of this list.
Mr. Levin, it's Lori Dew. Question for you. Hi there. Thanks for being with us. Osama bin Laden has been interviewed. He can be found when he wants to be found. So what is the United States going to have to do to try to locate this man, and even go so far as to hunt him down?
Well, he's a difficult guy to catch. First of all, he's being harbored by the Taliban, which, look, let me tell you something. This denial from the Taliban is rubbish.
Right.
The Taliban has harbored this known international fugitive for some time now, and I think the Taliban is not necessarily responsible for this, obviously, but they certainly know that they're harboring a known wanted terrorist. This guy travels in nomadic convoys probably throughout Afghanistan, and probably with a wink and a nod from the Taliban regime. He might also travel into rural parts of Pakistan, for all we know. American intelligence did track him. They almost killed him at one point a few years ago. They missed. They were tracking him through the use of a satellite telephone. But, you know, when you're talking about someone who is being harbored in an extremely remote part of the world by a government that is at least not against him, it makes it a more difficult operation. That being said, I think you're going to see a ratcheted response from the United States military to catch him, and, by the way, the people responsible for him. One thing that I just want to say, even if you take out Osama bin Laden, he has many minions out there who regard him as a mentor and who would carry out this work even if he was taken out. The thing here is he has the financial resources and the wherewithal to coordinate this kind of stuff.
Presumably the National Security Council and the intelligence community are meeting to talk about options to try to find bin Laden or whoever is responsible for this. We may not know who's responsible for quite some time. Should we have confidence in our National Security Council and in our FBI that they will find whoever's responsible for this?
Yes, I'm living proof that the FBI does their job. When I was working at a civil rights office in Alabama, they thwarted a bombing attempt. The thing is, in a pluralistic, democratic country like ours, we don't live in a hermetically sealed society. And one of the things that they do have is hindsight now. In other words, they can go in and look at all their intercepts. They can look at manifests. They can piece together information that they might not have been able to put together before the picture had come together. So I have a high degree of confidence that the FBI, who are scrambling people internationally now, will catch many of the people responsible.
All right, Brian Levin, terrorism expert, director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, and our hearts go out to the victims, and as a former New York City police officer, to those firefighters and police officers who are absolute heroes. God bless all these people.
God bless them indeed. It's a very good point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, the leader of this great country of ours, President Bush, addressed our very distraught nation earlier tonight with words of reassurance in this incredible time of trouble.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
The President of the United States at 8:30 Eastern Time, several hours ago now, as we look at the scenes live. On the left-hand side of your screen, that's the Pentagon. That is in the Washington, D.C. area, actually Northern Virginia. And on the right-hand side of your screen is what's left of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. And these disasters changing more than the skylines in these two cities. They're actually changing America.
The skyline of New York changed forever. And with it, the landscape of America. Today, the nation is reminded there are forces at work in our world that would destroy us all if they could.
This has been an absolutely unbelievable morning. The news is breaking almost faster than we can get it to you right now.
Both buildings down now.
Taken down by enemies so motivated and so willing to act. Now, what will the United States response against them be? Not just today, but in the weeks to come and for the future of this nation.
The city is closed. You cannot leave the city.
Today in New York, the tunnels and bridges to Manhattan closed. Many of the subway stations down. The financial markets canceling trading. Workers sent home. Hospitals initiating enormous disaster plans. And in and around Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol, all evacuated. The president airborne. Location undisclosed. Fighter jets escorting Air Force One. Across America, all air travel suspended for the first time in the nation's history.
state and federal offices closed, and perhaps most ominously, the United States military went to its highest alert status. For them, we are at war. In the days and weeks that follow, America will take toll of this day. The wounded, treated, the dead, buried, then mourned. And even before the mourning is complete, the nation will turn to preventing this from happening again. But how? And what will those precautions be? Given today's events, no idea, no suggestion seems outrageous. Will armed fighter jets patrol the skies? Will anti-aircraft defenses be put into place in and around major cities? Will New York look like London during World War II? There is no event to which we can turn in order to put today into context. The attacks have no counterpart in world history. As a nation, we can recover, but we will never return to a time before 9/11, 2001. Whatever the United States response will be, certainly we are in uncharted waters, and our very livelihoods are at stake. In New York, Shepard Smith, Fox News.
All right, we gotta run. Look at this.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
September 11th, 2001, a day in America that will live in infamy.
An unimaginable horror. 4 jetliners, all hijacked, 3 of them deliberately flown into major American landmarks, thousands of people injured, thousands of people dead for sure. That death toll could reach 4 figures or perhaps even higher. It is 3 a.m. in the east, midnight in the west, and we're glad you're with us. I'm Rick Fulbaum.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lori Dew. Welcome to Fox News' continuing coverage of Terrorism Hits America. This is a multi-pronged story as we come to you at this hour. The FBI is looking into a possible link between these attacks and the international terrorist Osama bin Laden.
And the other part of the story is that rescue workers are mounting 2 massive efforts. They're sifting through the rubble at the destroyed World Trade Center Plaza in New York City and also the damaged Pentagon in Northern Virginia. And there are reports that some victims on the 4 hijacked airplanes made last-second goodbyes from their cell phones before those planes crashed. We begin our coverage this hour with David Lee Miller in downtown Manhattan, where the skyline there has been changed forever. David?
That's right, Rick, and so too have the lives of New Yorkers and in many ways Americans as well. Now, a massive search and rescue effort is now underway at this hour. The authorities say as many as 2,000 searchers are taking part. We expect that it's really going to begin in earnest when dawn begins. We have some new pictures to show you. Now, these are unedited pictures. They are raw pictures, but they're important to see. They were recorded just a short time ago, and they were taped right near the World Trade Tower, what was once that site, near New York's West Side Highway. And here you can see the fallen debris. You can see a footbridge over the highway that has collapsed. You can see the ground covered with white ash. It looks almost like a dusting of heavy snow, and you can also see the remnants of some of the people who fled the scene and perhaps who died in this horrible, vicious attack. Now, we also have some live pictures we can show you, which are tell you what is unfolding now about 6 blocks behind me here on Church Street in Lower Manhattan. This is the scene now where rescue workers are beginning their operation.
The authorities believe that thousands of people are now buried under once what was the World Trade Center. Not known how many of them might be alive. The mayor of New York, Mayor Giuliani, has said that at least 2 people trapped under the rubble were able to call their family in Seattle. So definitely people are alive. How many, we do not know. It's really going to be a race against the clock to get them out. All of us certain now they're going to be bringing in sniffer dogs, acoustical equipment to try and detect the people that are buried. But as I mentioned, it's not clear how badly they are hurt or how much longer they can last. The mayor said it's going to take at least a few days before we can get some type of clear estimate as to exactly how many people have actually been killed. And as for the scene right now in Lower Manhattan, as you can tell, the electricity is off here. The authorities have turned it off. They have disconnected the gas in order to prevent the possibility of explosions or further fire. And the lights you do see are provided by batteries or generators. It almost makes for a very surreal setting. But as dawn approaches, the search itself is going to begin in earnest, as I said. And at that time, we expect that some of the officials here are going to start to make some very gruesome discoveries. Back to you in the studio.
All right, David Lee Miller, thanks very much, David. As we continue to look at some live pictures of the devastation, a lot of the injured are being treated at a nearby hospital, New York's St. Vincent's Hospital.
Dari Alexander has been there all night. She joins us again with the latest. Dari.
Hey, Lori. You know, once again, we, along with hospital workers, are playing the waiting game. We haven't seen any EMS trucks come up here anytime soon, and I guess, you know, as David was talking about it, it takes quite a while for them to get through all of that rubble. I know that because David is a journalist and they pushed a lot of people back pretty far, it's hard perhaps to get somewhat of a perspective on what's going on, but I'm standing here with Rafael de la Peña, who is a reserve member of the National Guard. He was out there early this morning between the plane strikes, so he was there after the first, helping some of the people, and was there when it happened. And I was talking with Rafael earlier, asking him to give me a little bit of a perspective of what this rubble looks like, so we can understand exactly how long and what has to be done to really get those people out. Those people we're hoping that are still alive. And you heard also the report that people were calling
yes, on the cellular phones. Yeah, that gives us a lot of hope, especially for people like me that were there from the very early of the disaster. And we saw actually people jumping through the windows, people falling, the actual 2 towers collapse. Actually, the 3rd tower collapsed, the number 7. And we could only do the first phase of the search and rescue, which is not moving any debris, just with the dogs. But after that, it was getting too dark, and they told us that it was over. So they now have to bring the big trucks to move the debris. Then we received the news that they're activating another 50 ambulances here, because there's people calling from cellular phones inside the debris.
Now that is certainly... We're very happy to hear that. I know that you and I talked about the fact that what we don't want to talk about is what you saw immediately after the blast, you know, the bodies, all of that stuff. But help me out here. Describe to me, you talked about like a 2-story high pile of debris. I mean, help us understand how you get people out of all of that. I mean, because that's obviously what we're waiting for, those people who are alive under there.
Well, the sensation that we get from the actual activity of rescuing, it could be overcome by the fear of another explosion. See, when you're walking in top of this debris trying to get people out, you're also scared because you don't know if it's going to explode again. And what we did is the most we could, moving debris that was little, and actually, you know, trying not to hurt people more.
That's right.
Because that's why they can use trucks until we finish. When we finish, that's when the big trucks come in. They actually gave up at that point, and they were just moving big debris when they started hearing people calling. So this is like a renewal of the spirit of going back again, which I'm going back again next morning to continue doing the search and rescue.
Now, describe to me, though, the huge chunks of debris. I mean, a lot to move down there, right?
Okay, first, if you want, I could tell you, actually, when it fell down, that's the whole thing. When it fell down, you saw the cloud of smoke and you could not see if the actual debris was coming in top of you. You just saw the cloud coming in top of you. So you're running thinking that something is going to hit you.
Right.
So when you come back, you actually expect to see the debris all over. And it was neatly in top of a pile, like I would say like almost 2 blocks. And it was 2-story or almost 3-story high.
Okay.
The pieces of debris were not small.
Okay.
But some of it became sand. Some of the, what do you call it?
The debris, the little
debris,
spectacles.
they became sand. So it makes it harder for us to see and breathe inside of the actual zone.
Well, you were certainly one of the lucky ones that definitely got out of there. And as we reported to you earlier, about 45 rescue workers did come through this hospital. 1 firefighter did die. But once again, as you just heard Rafael say, a high spirit. They had to reassess at 5:30, figure out what they could do. But once again, they have a high spirit again, went back down there, and Rafael will be back down there tomorrow, hoping once again to find some more people that they can bring up here and treat. That's what's happening here outside of St. Vincent's Hospital. Back to you guys.
All right, Derry Alexander at St. Vincent's, thanks very much. Well, one question looms in the minds of Americans. Who is responsible? Well, possible suspects are emerging in this terrorist attack.
And Fox's Todd Connor is live now from Fox Central with this late-breaking story. Todd?
That's right, Rick and Lori. As you know, the newspaper is starting to hit the newsstands this morning, and one of the stories from the Boston Herald has apparently led police to, or the story is about police finding some possible suspects out of Logan International Airport in Boston. The story goes that authorities in Massachusetts have identified at least 5 Arab men as suspects. They launched from Logan International Airport. Police seized in the central parking garage a car filled with Arabic language flight training manuals, according to the source for the Boston Herald. Now, 2 of the men whose passports were traced to United Arab Emirates were brothers, one of whom was a trained pilot, according to this source. Now, at least 2 other suspects flew into Logan yesterday from Portland, Maine, where authorities believe they had traveled to after crossing over from Canada. Once in the air, according to this source of the Boston Herald, the hijackers in one of the 2 planes that left Boston that hit the Twin Towers began killing flight attendants in order to lure a pilot out of the cockpit and then take over the plane. They started killing stewardesses in the back of a plane as a diversion. The pilot came back to help, and that is how they got into the cockpit, according to the source. The suspects apparently had no guns, but used shaving kits and other carry-on luggage to smuggle knife-like weapons made up of plastic handles with razor blades inserted into those handles. That's what they used as their weapons, according to this source for the Boston Herald. People were calling the plane, as we've heard many reports. You 2 have reported